Okay, I'd like to go ahead with this meeting of the House Education Funding Committee. We have a 1 o'clock bill which we have to hear today. This is Senate Bill 586. This is an early bill. That means we have to have it out of committee by the end Thursday of next week. So pay attention. We have Senator Murphy as the prime sponsor of the bill. Unfortunately, he has to be in another location at this time. So we are pleased to recognize Representative McGuire, who is also a co-sponsor of the bill. No, he's not. But he has been kind enough to say he will introduce the bill for Senator Murphy. So welcome, Representative McGuire.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. For the record, Dan McGuire. I represent the town of Epsom. Senator Murphy had to take a child to a hospital appointment, so I've been demoted to senator for the next few minutes. I handed out three pieces.
We'll give you an applause for that.
I handed out 3 pieces of paper to you. One is a first draft of an amendment that I wrote for this bill, or I had drafted for this bill, and I just got it this morning, and I noticed already some problems with it. But we'll talk about that when we get to it. The other 2 are a side-by-side of current law, which is the short page, and the amendment that I gave you, which really incorporates all of the bill plus some. So in order to explain the bill, I want to start with current law. So let's look at RSA 198:4-D, reports required of cities and school districts. Okay. So this is current law. It's not being much changed by either the bill or the amendment. So what does it do? This is about what kind of reporting is required. The reason it says cities is because schools are departments of cities, right? Where there's a school in a city. So the city is the entity required to report, even though it's really, the report is about their school, okay? So cities, school districts, and charter schools have to do certain kinds of reporting. In Part 1, Roman 1, they have to report on what happened in their election in terms of how much money was allocated by the voters to go to the school or by the city council in case of cities. Part 2 is they have to revise the report from Part 1 if there's been any change in estimated revenues essentially at the start of the school year, September 1st. That's Part Roman 2. Part Roman 3 is the main topic of this bill. So this says that every city, school district, and charter school have to file a financial report showing a summary of income, expenditures, and balance sheet. And it's, annually, and they call it a statistical report. So it's not really as formal maybe as an audited financial statement. And it has to be certified by the chairman of the school committee or school district, et cetera, that it's correct. Okay. Part Roman 3A, the Department of Education develops accounting standards, which shall be used by all of these entities, and they presumably put those accounting standards into rules. The Part Roman 4, the budget, if there's a budget committee, if school districts have a budget committee, they have to file their budget at a certain time. And then 5 and 6 have to do with how is auditing done and how are those reports published. So Roman 5, basically there's 2 ways you can have an audit. One is by an independent CPA, essentially, can do an audit of your school department, or you can elect auditors. Okay, so that's what Roman 5 and 6 are about. 5 is you have an independent audit, and they publish their audit statement according to 21J. That's the way towns publish public accountants reports. And by the way, there's a typo in existing law there. At the end of Roman 5, you see there's a Roman 3. Well, RSA 21J:19 only has Roman 1 and 2. So that 3 is becoming a 2. Okay, so it's possibly worth passing something just to get that fixed. Anyway. And then Roman Part 6 of existing law is in the case where you elect your auditors. And it's kind of weird law. I mean, I'm not so familiar with it because Epsom uses Part 5, not Part 6, but I assume some towns may elect their auditors. And it has to do with, you could elect more than one auditor, and if you do so, one does one year, and then they alternate years and stuff like that. I mean, it's kind of a weird procedure. Okay. Maybe I should stop for questions about existing law, if anything.
Are there questions on the existing law? Representative Damon.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for the introduction and taking my question. Having not recently read RSA 671:5, or the procedure one there, are there criteria for the elected auditors for who can run for those positions?
Thank you for the question. I don't believe so, but in any case, this bill is not, none of the versions of this bill are changing RSA 671:5 at all.
Thank you.
Further questions on the existing law?
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
All right, so now let's go to the other side by side. So the highlights between this and the one that's has my name at the top, those are, this is a side-by-side comparison. So the parts that are highlighted in gray in your copy, that's the new stuff in my amendment and also from the bill. And the highlights on the existing law are the parts going away, right? So mostly those parts going away just have to, you know, they're ands and grammatical kind of stuff. They're not all that significant, but let me go into the main changes in the amendment. And basically, there are four main changes from existing law in this, both in the amendment. There are two of them are from the bill, two of them are from my amendment. Okay. The bill changes, if you go to Roman 3, you see a big, heavy gray section at the bottom of the page. That's one of the major changes from the bill, and I'll explain in a moment. And if you go on the back, there's another big, heavy gray section. That's the other change from this bill. Okay, those are the main things the bill is doing. The first big gray section is putting a lot more detail into what needs to be reported. Right? It doesn't just say a financial report. It says information about employees and staff and their pay, itemized list of assets, debts, bond agreements, lease agreements, and so on. It's basically putting a lot more detail into what this report contains. Okay? And just as a comment, as an aside, I think the stuff about employees and staff and payroll, that's very important. That's a big plus for this bill, in my opinion. When we do the state budget, it's not just, the things we worry about are not just dollars and cents. They're also personnel and headcount, because that's a key part of the expense of any kind of governmental operation, is how many employees do you have, what are their salaries, and so on. So I think that particular information is a big improvement via this bill. All right, and then the second part on the back page here, this other big gray section, that has to do with the timing of the report and requiring the Department of Education to work with the reporting entities to make sure that their reports are complete. right? And correct and all that sort of stuff. And so, so this is telling the department, you have to look at these reports, and if you find any errors, you've got to work with the people who reported to get them fixed and so on. And it has some teeth in it, because if you look at the last sentence there, it tells the department to withhold state funding unless these reports have been turned in and are correct, okay? That part, I'm not going to comment on right now, but in general, that's what this second part is doing, and it's unchanged from the bill. Okay. Then you have the parts that my amendment adds to this, and there are two main things. One is it adds school administrative units as reporting entities. So the current law and the bill only is about schools, school districts, charter schools, and school departments of cities. But it doesn't say anything about school administrative units, and I think those are a significant part of the whole operation of schools, and so this adds them to entities that have to do this kind of reporting, okay? So that's one part. And then the second part is it specifies that the report itself shall be in a searchable electronic format, which means something like a searchable PDF or Word file or, you know, spreadsheet or something, not a scanned. It's to be you know, that you can't just make a report and scan it in and send it that way. It has to be something that people can search on and use electronically. So those are the two things my amendment does. Like I said, I think there's a couple of places that we might want to we might want to tweak in this amendment. One is, I noticed if you look at the first big blob on the bottom of the first page, it says at the end, submitted within 6 months of the fiscal year. Well, it's the third from the end, third and fourth from the end, okay, right? You see that? Submitted within 6 months. I think they mean within 6 months of the end of the fiscal year, right? So there's I think, a little typo there. The other thing is the changes to Roman Part 3 here need to be better integrated with the current requirement in Roman Part 5, because Roman Part 5 is already about reporting an audited statement by a CPA, right? And so, but Roman Part 3 now we're adding an audited statement, et cetera. So I think we may have to integrate Roman Part 3 with the requirements of Roman Part 5 and possibly Roman Part 6 of RSA 198:4D. So that's my presentation. Happy to answer questions.
I do have one question first. I guess it's in all the bills where the Commissioner of Department of Education may withhold all revenue to a city, school district, charter public school, etc., SAU and yours, pending completion of this form, this report. By all revenue, do you mean grant money, or are you talking adequacy? It can be better defined?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman, for this question. And so you're talking about, if you go to either this is not changed by me.
It's in both bills.
It's in the Senate.
It's in everything, yeah.
Yes, right. It's not an existing law, obviously. But if you look at the official amendment, the official bill, what we're talking about here is line 14 of page 2. The commissioner shall withhold any and all state funding allocated to any non-compliant city, school district, charter school, et cetera, right? So this is This is shall withhold, right, not may, and it's any and all state funding. So I would tend to agree with you that that seems,
Clarify page 2. I think, are you referring to page 2 of your amendment? Because you.
oh, sorry, my amendment. Yeah.
Of your amendment, okay.
I'm sorry. But this is, oh yeah, the bill, I could go to the bill, sorry. It's the same. On the bill, this is line 22, and it starts at the end of line 22 and goes into line 23, right? Yeah. The commissioner shall withhold any and all state funding allocated to a non-compliant, et cetera. So if you're asking me the question, just from my opinion of that, it does seem awfully harsh, right? So, and maybe not workable, right? I mean, this is, if they're non-compliant on this one little area, do you put down the giant hammer of no adequacy, no other funding, no other grants, all this sort of stuff, right? I mean, maybe there should be some kind of teeth, but that seems to me somewhat excessive.
Thank you. Are there questions, Representative Spilsbury, and then Representative Popovich, and then Representative Bricky?
Thank you. On the same line of thought regarding the teeth, maybe I'm not reading this right, but it's my understanding that the commissioner would withhold any and all funds pending the filing, but we've got a 6-month period of time within which the filing is timely. So when we're talking about withholding funds, I would think we need to clarify it's only those funds that would be payable after the deadline has passed and the report is in arrears.
Yes,
We're not going to withhold funds during the 6 months that they've been granted.
absolutely.
That needs a change in the wording, I believe.
Right, because it's non-compliant, right? So you're compliant if you're still in the 6-month period.
Until it's filed, you're not compliant. So I think that needs to change. I have one more.
Yeah, and what we're going to have to try to be careful here, and I probably started off incorrectly here. Representative McGuire is introducing the bill on behalf of Senator Murphy, and he's not a sponsor of this bill.
Yes.
So I think what we ought to do is if we have questions, general questions, that's fine. But I think that we're going to get into this discussion, and I started it out by asking us lead question to that.
Isn't it germane now, though, to refine the amendment?
Yeah, I think that if we have others that are presenting or coming here to testify from the public, we might be able to ask them. Or, there's questions about adequacy anyways. You're getting into some real litigated areas there currently in law. So I'd just be careful where we go right now.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I would agree with
You may
you.
go ahead if you want to follow up.
This is more of a work session.
I don't want this to become an
topic.
executive
Yeah,
session.
I
That's right.
understand. Yeah.
Yeah, this is very minor, and I would raise it with the primary sponsor anyway. Again, for clarification, in the bill, first page, line 5, where it says at the close of the year, I would change that to as of the close of the year. It's a sentence that can be read two ways. The active verb is shall file a report. So if it says shall file a report at the close of the year, that's not what it intends. It intends 6 months. What this relates to is the timing of things like balance sheet. So as of the close of the year would clarify that, I believe.
Yes, thank you for that point. That at the close of the year is from existing law, but you're right that maybe it needs to be integrated better with the 6-month provision. Yes.
Representative Popovich.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Representative, for offering to introduce the bill and taking questions. In your suggested amendment, the bottom of the first page, there is the requirement that the auditor financial report for the last completed fiscal year shall be submitted within 6 months. Do you have any thoughts on the 6 months period itself? Because it kind of seems very challenging to me.
Yes, thank you for the question. So that's, again, from the bill, not just from my amendment, but also what's unclear, because the way this is written is 6 months, but the way the current law is written is, it's by September 1st, right? So I haven't yet done the comparison to know I would assume schools end their fiscal year June, right?
June 30th.
June 30th, right. And so 6 months from, so it seems to me it's a shorter period. Well, I don't know if it's a shorter period, right? Because maybe currently they only have from June 30th to September 1st
No
to
way.
write this report.
Nobody can complete an audit like that.
Well, it's not an audit, remember.
No.
The current law is just a report. So this is, you see what I mean? This is becoming an audit as part of the
I don't want to
bill.
get too far
Yeah,
into
so
this.
this
We
is a,
could get
this is a
into
detail we should
a
talk
lot of
about.
detail that we will be doing later. It went from Representative Popovich to Representative Bricky.
I'm not sure if, thank you for
Yeah.
letting me speak, and thank you for taking my question. I'm not really sure if this is the time for it, but aren't already all employees and staff payroll and their pay, isn't that already public knowledge?
Generally, I think yes, but I don't know where in the RSAs it's,
Okay,
you know, called out, right?
Okay.
Yeah.
I just, so maybe it's part of what we need to talk
There
about.
will be a discussion which we have because I had a discussion with Representative McGuire prior to and said, a lot of this that I've read in this bill seems to be in certain areas within statute or within administrative rule. And we
Right,
got to cipher through and find out where all
Okay.
that's located.
thank you very much.
Further question, Representative Colcom.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for taking the questions. Both in the bill as well as your amendment, it identifies that a balance sheet showing assets and liabilities are to be, isn't, by definition, a balance sheet is assets, liabilities, but also net position. So my concern with just limiting it or just saying showing assets and liabilities, we're leaving out some of the net position, the unassigned fund balance, or maybe the negative effect to the net position might be viewed as optional. So a balance sheet by definition has those items in it.
Yes, thanks for that question. It's quite possible that in adding and making it more detailed, it is not yet complete, right? So the current law is very vague, right? A financial report, right? And so this is trying to say, I want it to at least have, you know, well, actually, no. I mean, current law says assets and liabilities at the close of the year. So this is at least adding a little bit more detail, but not on that particular item, I guess.
So whereas
think
we've not
we leave it
had
as
any
balance sheet.
introduction of the amendment to this committee at this time, I don't want to get into a lot more discussion on
It's not the amendment, it's the bill.
or on the bill.
Yeah.
I'd rather, are there any other people, I got one other pink card here. Are there any others which would like to speak on this bill in the crowd today? Yeah. Okay, yeah. So any pink cards we have out there, would you please get them up to us, please? Representative Ames.
This is just a question about the status of review of these provisions that you've put forward that are changes in the underlying bill, and that are, because of the absence of the sponsor, in an uncertain status. But the question is, who's had a chance to review the new provisions that go beyond the old bill? Do you have any understanding of whether there's been input from the school district, municipal?
Oh, thank you for the question. The answer is no, right? This is our first time as the House seeing this bill. And this is, I think I'm introducing those particular changes, namely SAUs and an electronic form of the report, early in some sense, right? I could have brought it to a work session, but I'm giving it to you now at the public hearing so that we can get comments from others.
And to follow up on that one, Representative Ames, we do have the department here, and obviously this is coming in from across the wall from us. I'm sure the department's been engaged in this, seeing there are some funding there's a table with funding costs in there as well, which we got to address. So I think that the type of question you had would be great for Dr. Green later on when he comes forward. Representative Fellows.
Thank you. So I'm speaking to the bill as introduced.
Thank you.
So we don't go off into space here. So I'm just wondering if the sponsor understood that by making this amendment to this Roman numeral 3, that what the current Roman numeral 3 is the DOE 25. And that's a report that has extensive amounts of detail for expenditures and revenue. And that the reason that the deadline is September 1st is because that report needs to be submitted to the state so that revenue can set tax rates. Those reports are used for other publications throughout the year, and that I hope we can address the situation whereby we don't repeal the requirement to submit the DOE 25 to the state.
Thank you very much, Representative Fellows. And I've also had a discussion with the commissioner over there at DOE, and maybe Dr. Green can speak to this as well. There are a few districts have their DOE 25 form audited, very few. So maybe this has some linkage to that condition. I don't know, because this is the first time I'm hearing it too. So,
Can I,
pardon me? No, not right now. No.
can I slightly take that as a question and say something about it?
Representative McGuire, if you can do it in 30 seconds here, and then I want to get on to some of the others.
The main part about tax rates is more about what did the voters vote on, right? Parts 1 and 2, Roman 1 and 2 in existing law, not Roman 3. So that's my comment.
Okay, thank you.
Not true.
Further questions, Representative Damon?
Thank you. Thanks for taking my question. So in other legislation that's been proposed this year and this committee has worked on, there, and maybe also in the other education committee, sorry, it blurs a bit, but there's been substantial discussion of there not being very many audit firms in New Hampshire with the capacity to do these audits for school districts. And I believe one of the other pieces of legislation initially had a 6-month deadline, and then there was negotiation about moving that to 9 months or a year because of the reality that it simply wasn't going to get done by all the districts in 6 months. Has that been entertained at all with this bill? It's the same problem.
Thank you for the question. Not to my knowledge.
All questions for our work session, all right. We don't have much time. That's why I'm allowing a little bit of lenience right now, seeing that this is an early bill and we have to have her out next week. Representative Brown?
The original bill is introduced. Oh, thank you for taking my question. The original bill is introduced, had in the list an itemized list of, also after payroll, an itemized list of applicable benefit contributions. And that has dropped out of the Senate's amended version. Why don't we have employee benefit contributions, OPEB liabilities, and pension liabilities in the list?
All right, so let me find what you're talking about here. Are you asking about the bill as introduced to the bill as passed by the Senate, as amended by the Senate?
I'm talking about the bill as initially introduced.
Okay, so yeah, so this is not a question for me because you're asking about what happened inside the Senate's committee from their original version to this version, right? And maybe the department can answer that. So,
Thank you very much, Representative McGuire.
yeah.
I'd like to invite next card, which I have here, which is Michael Campbell, CPA.
Yeah, yes.
Thank you.
So to start, Mr. Chairman, committee members, thank you for having me here. My name is Michael Campo. I am a managing partner at Plotzik & Sanderson. We currently do, I believe, 240 municipal, school district, SAU, and special purpose audits across the state of New Hampshire. My entire staff works completely on governmental audits. I think what I can bring today is some expertise and experience from what I've done over the past 22, 23 years. My kids remind me how long it is. It's sad. I normally talk to boards, school boards, town councils, and so on. So bear with me. This is my first attempt at this, but I think I have value to add to the discussion for consideration. To start, I think a deadline is overdue. It would make a huge difference to the few audit firms we have in the state if we put the pressure on the local governments to establish a deadline and some guidelines on when they need to be ready. One of the biggest challenges we have today is there is a general lack of succession planning or execution in the finance offices we go to. Part of the reason for that, in my opinion, and this is just an opinion, is that it's becoming tougher and tougher to work for a local government. Between social media and the ability to say whatever is on your mind, whether it's in fact or completely fabricated, there are people who are highly qualified who just don't want to do it anymore. I believe I've heard the number of something like 9 current open BA positions on the school side. I know of at least 4 or 5 others who will be retiring in the next 24 months, none of which who are of retirement age. They're doing it because of the pressure that they're put on. While this necessarily wouldn't help them, I do believe that having timely audits makes a difference in terms of being clear and transparent to the voters, to the taxpayers, to the state as a whole, and it would add accountability to those offices. Some quick considerations, and I'm going to give you the 10,000-foot view of the audit process. Think of it as inputs and outputs. Inputs is all of the records that were provided for the audit in advance, and whether it's my firm or any of the other 3 that are the primary providers in the state, there is a request list that is sent to the client with plenty of time for questions to be asked and information to be shared electronically. To the best of my knowledge, all firms are still doing in-person audits. They may utilize some remote options. For example, we are based out of Concord, and we do places, Plymouth, Exeter. We might send a smaller crew out to the site, and then the balance of the crew will be working. We save an hour of travel time that those people are actually able to work on the audit. So as you had said, there's a shortage of audit firms. Our firm, and I don't want to speak for the other firms, but I believe that they are also looking at how can we be more efficient with the time we have. The service we provide is important. It's why we're still in this. Trust me, governmental auditing is not the most lucrative business to be in. We find it important what we do is important. The opinion letters we issue hold value. We take pride in the fact that you as elected officials, your residents, they're looking at our reports and they feel like they can rely on it. There's a lot of pride that comes in that. My recommendation to this committee would be to consider a 9-month window. That doesn't mean that jobs wouldn't be completed within that first 6 months. My approach at my firm would be that those who are ready, we're going to get them done and out as soon as possible. It should also be noted that this year, if you're looking at the audits and the timelines of them, with the federal government shutdown, the federal compliance supplement was delayed substantially. And by the way, when it came out in like October, it was a couple thousand pages that we had to read through and then apply very quickly. So that's true for every firm in the country. You just couldn't issue the audits. So that impacts this year's turnaround. Even still, I do believe, we were still held to the 9-month deadline of the federal clearinghouse. So in addition, for the state, the recommendation there to think about 9 months, consider that the federal clearinghouse, meaning that if you have federal funds going forward of $1 million or more that you expend as a government, you are required to submit it to the federal clearinghouse. You would have the same timeline as the federal government. In what I just passed out, you'll see the actual support for where that is coming from. I can speak more, but I think maybe taking questions might be a better use of my time. There were some things that came up. If I could just quickly address a couple points that I heard earlier. The mention of a scanned document to the state that's searchable. I agree with that. Our concern is when we're sending it to clients that they could be modified. So I would feel it'd be safe to, we do have them sign a waiver basically saying that you will not modify this. That's the only concern we have with searchable, and I would assume that's the same concerns our colleagues have as well. Including SEUs in this is a tremendous idea. I think they should be included in the same timeline. And quickly on the DOE 25, I'm not aware of any that are actually audited. I know our firm does have a few clients where they have requested us to help prepare it or review it, I guess you would say, but it's not necessarily an audit. To really audit a DOE 25, you have to go through the whole audit. You can't just rely on the information provided. And that is the form that is submitted in September, not an audit. So with that, is it okay to take questions, Chairman?
Yes, it is. Thank you. I'll open up with a question which was asked at the very, very beginning, I believe, by Representative Damon. What is the criteria that either the state or the Department of Education sets for what that governs an auditor in terms of what do they have to possess? You have a CPA. You're a CPA. To do an audit of the DOE 25 form, is there any kind of an audit, or can I had personal finance literacy as a high school kid. Am I able to?
To render an opinion in the state of New Hampshire, you have to be a licensed CPA. So you can't, myself, if I wasn't a CPA, I couldn't just issue an opinion letter and say that you can rely on this. That's part of the industry standards, is that we need to, one, obtain the CPA designation, and then we need to do continual professional education. Because of the industry I'm working in, majority of my CPE ends up being in the area of Yellow Book and governmental accounting.
Thank you, Representative Damon.
Thank you, and thank you for bringing that question forward. Thank you for being here. Nice to see you again.
Nice to see you as well.
So following up on the chair's question, when I brought it up earlier, it was in reference to the current statute language that a district could use a professional auditor such as your firm,
Yep.
but separate statute that it can be an elected auditor. And so I was trying to get to whether our statute defines who can run to be an elected auditor, because if I don't want to put words in the chair's mouth, but I don't think here I would probably be the best people to do this.
What do you mean? I had personal finance literacy.
So did I.
Okay.
I don't believe there's any qualification requirements for that position.
We need to remove that.
Yeah.
I'm not over, we actually don't see it all that often. Especially, we see it more in towns, particularly up north, where I know we'll get a request for proposal for some very small towns, and we look at our current client base and say, from an economic standpoint, we're going to pay to do this engagement. We can't do it. Typically, they'll have a locally elected auditor. Another route that some of our smaller clients, or not our clients, but smaller communities have gone to, is reviewed financial statements, which isn't audited, but a lot of times a CPA firm can include a letter of review on that.
One follow-up, and then we'll start rotating around here.
Thank you. So could you differentiate for us, please, between an audit and the review that you just cited?
Yes.
What does the review encompass?
Sure. So with a review, essentially all the figures and support are provided to the people preparing the review. They review it to make sure that it's reasonable, that what's in there, for example, if you say you have $1 million and you give us a bank statement with $3 million, we're not going to be able to sign off on that. There are no audit procedures. We're not testing anything. It really is just more of a comparison basis.
No, let's go to some other folks first. Let's represent Colcom.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I didn't realize I didn't shut that off. Thank you for coming and
you.
offering that information. I'm curious, given that there are not that many auditors that are working for us here in the state in this capacity, roughly how long does it take for you, on average, to get through a school district's audit? And I realize it'll change based on the size of it. But also, is 6 months the right amount of time, or should we have a file and extension period for some so that if the auditors are running behind and are causing somewhat of the delay, would that be something that would work?
That's a great question, and the size certainly does make a difference. The majority of our clients, we look to get in within 5 days, and what happens is we expand the team or contract the team. So in our firm, I believe we have 23 to 25 staff members dedicated to governmental audits. That's assuming the audit's clean, and that's what we've been finding in a lot of cases. They're not necessarily ready for the audit. So when we do that, we go in, we do the audit. If there's a single audit attached to it, the $1 million or more of federal funding, that ends up being additional field work where we'll come back and do that separately. So call that maybe 8 business days that we need to finish it, and then we need to start preparing and drafting the financial statements. From there, the financial statements are sent in draft form to management. In some cases, there are boards who want to see it as well. Management then is responsible for reviewing the financial statements to make sure that they're in agreement with it. They're also provided any comments, recommendations we might have for them. We sometimes will get pushback on those, and sometimes it's just a case if they don't like the wording of it, we will work with them. As long as the general message is conveyed, we're willing to work with our clients. Then they have to prepare the management discussion and analysis, which basically is a 7-page document that gives an overview that's supposed to help the users of the financial statements understand the financial statements. Once that's in place, they're issued a legal letter template to send to their attorneys. So if you have one attorney, it's quicker. If you have 3 or 4 attorneys, it takes a little more time in terms of their response. The reason we do the legal letters is to make sure, remember, we're doing an audit of June 30th. We could be in there in October. A lot can occur in a couple months. So we want to make sure that we're not omitting a subsequent event or a material occurrence that should be included in the financial statements. Ultimately, what we want is that when somebody, a stakeholder, whether it's a lender, a taxpayer, a board member, opens up that financial statement, that they can rely on the information in there. So if we miss a subsequent event at the end, we've let down our prime users. Once the legal letter is received from the attorney and reviewed, we then will issue a rep letter template that they will then complete and return to us. So a lot of the delay in the audit is for creation of an MD&A, waiting on the legal letter, allowing time to review the financial statements. Did that answer the question? Yeah. It's a fun process.
Representative Fellows.
Yes, thank you. Just very briefly, could you describe the difference between the regular audit that you do and a financial, a forensic audit?
Yeah, this is actually, thank you for the question. This is a common question. Typically, when you have a forensic audit, there is a direct objective, did this occur? And then we will work with management to develop a listing of what are the procedures you want us to test? And the results are yes or no. So I know myself, when it comes to forensic audits, I'm very clear with my clients and say, what is your intent if you achieve what you want here? Are you going to go after this? Because they're expensive. It's not, as a business person, I probably shouldn't be deterring people from it, but I don't want taxpayers to spend money on a service that there's not going to be a ton of value. So, for example, we've had one situation where a school district felt that their food service director was buying food for their contracting business, their catering business. And they ended up letting that individual go, and they're coming back saying, we want to go after her. So a couple of the questions I said were, is she gone? Have you replaced her? Yes. Okay. Do you plan on pursuing legal action? No. Do you plan on any type of remediation in terms of refunding the school district for what you've done? No. Unfortunately, at that point, you have to start looking at it from a cost-benefit analysis. Does it make sense to compound the loss if you don't plan on remediating the situation?
Representative Spilsbury.
Thank you. You've already touched on the classical distinction in accountancy between an audit and a review. But I want to focus on the nomenclature used in the current law and in the bill. The current law begins a financial report, and it then goes on to describe what should be in that financial report, a summary of receipts and expenditures, etc. The bill starts out by referring to an audit, And it says, this report shall be either an audit completed and verified by an independent certified public accountant, or if no such audit is completed, a financial audit report. And it then pretty much has the same components as current law. Financial audit report is not a term I'm familiar with. And then it goes on, in fact, it sort of seems like an amalgamation. It goes on in lines 11, 12, et cetera, and continues to refer back to a final audit or financial report. So my question is, if this was enacted as is, how would you understand the term financial report as distinct from a final audit? And does financial audit report as a distinct term have a distinct meaning?
I think when you throw in the audit, I think the expectation is that it's going to be completed by a CPA who issues an opinion. So whether it's unqualified.
So either an audit or an audit.
Well, I mean, with the financial report, it could be a report presented that just isn't subject to the same criteria as a financial statement audit.
Right. I think this goes back to the point that Representative Fellows was making a little earlier, that we're trying to amend a statute that really relates to the DOE 25 and the setting of the tax rate. Therefore, it's got a September 1st deadline, and it's got a particular purpose in our existing statutes. And we're now looking for a place to plug in the idea of a more comprehensive audit. Maybe we haven't found the right place in the statute.
Any further questions? Yes, Representative Cocom.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just to circle back to my question originally, with the way that this bill is written today, it's saying that if these audits aren't done within 6 months, that the Department of Revenue shall hold back the money. So I want to go back to that. Would it be reasonable to think that sometimes the auditors fall behind in their work schedule of these audits, and that the auditors might be the reason for the 6 months not being met, and therefore an extension would be fair so that the school districts are not being withheld their funds, and that the auditors would then file a 6 months extension. And I'm differentiating that from the school districts are not responding to you, you're not getting the data, and you're not capable of finishing it, but rather your workforce and what you are putting into the work that you need is just preventing you from helping that school district meet their deadline.
I think that's a very fair point, that there are situations where that happens. Not with my firm, of course, but
Of course not. But I guess my point being, I would hate to hold back funds from a school if it was beyond the school's ability to meet the deadline.
You're holding it back from the kids. Okay, Representative Damon.
Thank you. So I have two things, please. Does standard audit procedure include consideration of the current audit findings relative to prior year's audits?
yes, it does. So when we start an audit, we go through preliminary risk assessment procedures. One of the key areas we look at is prior year comments, whether we did it or another firm has performed the audit. In addition, we will go through meeting minutes. We will go through policies and procedures. One of the more common issues we find when we're auditing is that policies and procedures are older than half of the people in this room. They haven't been touched. And there's been a lot of technology changes and just state laws that have changed. So that's a common comment. But if we see the policies haven't been changed for years, the risk is increasing. So similar to if we see issues with, these people haven't reconciled cash in a year later, that's the first thing we're going to look at. Are you reconciling cash?
Follow up?
It's a different question.
Go ahead.
Thank you. Could you just comment, and particularly in light of your observation earlier on that a number of districts have lost their qualified business administrators and that there's not a surplus of folks applying for those positions? How challenging or not is it for audit firms to receive the data that they need from school districts in a usable form and a timely manner?
I would say that it depends on the district. If you have somebody who's competent, who's been there for a long time, they know exactly what we're looking for. Even if it's a new request, it's not a heavy lift for them to get us what we need. We have a lot of people who are coming into the industry who are very new. They lack the experience and knowledge of not just the audit request, but even the day-to-day requirements of their position. If anybody's talked to a BA about their day-to-day responsibilities, you know they wear a lot of hats. You know, if all else fails and the superintendent's not available, assistant superintendent's not available, they're third in line. So, I mean, they could be out directing buses one day and then figuring out the bus routes the next. So it depends, I guess, is what I would say on that. Their ability to provide that information. We have some that have really adopted the use of their GL software that allows for uploading invoices, contracts, information like that. They're a very easy client to be able to work with, particularly in a remote capacity. We're able to do the items on site that we have to do on site, and then they were able to fill in the gaps as needed. It makes for a very efficient audit. City of Lebanon, Lebanon School District are two of those.
Representative Byrd?
Just a quick question. This amendment requires an itemized list of all employees or staff on payroll and their pay. Those two numbers could be different depending on when an employee started. Do you prepare a list of what the salary rates are for the staff or only what they're paid?
What we do in terms of payroll is we get an understanding of the payroll process. We will then perform a walkthrough of one individual or multiple individuals if there's different approaches to different areas, and we will go through and determine, can we rely on the controls? If we can rely on the controls, we'll then do different testing on payroll to make sure that budget to actual, contract to actual, depending on the situation, we do testing specific to payroll. Being the largest expenditure for all of our school districts, it gets the appropriate level of attention. We also don't just roll forward the same approach. I know when I started 22, 23 years ago, it used to be 941 testing. We felt like that was inadequate. It didn't cover us enough in terms of the risk associated with the area. So we've now drilled it down to a much lower level.
Thank you.
Any further questions? We have some other folks. Representative Popovich?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for being here. And I just wanted to say that when I was the finance director at the town of Windham, I did get audited by Plotzik and Sanderson, and frankly, I deeply respect their professional expertise, and they've been nothing but helpful. Any delays that may have happened during the audit were the problem of my department, not the fault of the auditing team. So, I deeply respect their expertise. I just want to bring you back to kind of the beginning because we've been talking about a lot of stuff. Your initial statement, I think, said that basically this is a needed requirement, but you would prefer it to be 9 months rather than 6 because the timeline of 6 months is not reasonable. Am I remembering that correctly through the fog of the rest of the hearing?
You are, and I should have also mentioned when I first started, another challenge that we have with the 6-month period is that you're also running into budget season. So you have two very high hour demand tasks that are being done, and you're throwing them together. And the concern I would have as somebody who's been through this for many years now is that will one or both suffer in the process. We're all seeing budgets that are tighter and tighter. We all read the news. It's across the state. I think the budget process deserves the appropriate amount of time and attention, as does the audit. The results of the audit are important. I should also mention that I know there's a need to have, or a desire to have the audit for prior to Election Day. The finance department should be able to, at any point, produce a financial statement that's available to the public. That's their job. In fact, the board should be reviewing budget to actual reports on a monthly basis. A lot of the problems we've seen across the state could have been mitigated by that very basic task of looking and saying, we're seeing one line really treading out of control in September. They're coming to us in April. There's nothing we can do in April. Freeze the budget and minimize the damage is the message that we have for them.
So are you saying that a school board should make sure that they get a manifest every meeting they have?
They should be looking at manifests every single meeting because under state law, they should be approving those manifests. In addition, they should be getting revenue and expenditure budget to actual reports that shows where they stand on both the revenue side and the expenditure side. A lot of times the revenues are kind of overlooked. I think there was a school district outside of Manchester that they had projected higher tuition than was feasible. As a result, the board was not looking at the shortfall in revenue, but the appropriations were lining up. They ended up in a deficit position because of that approach. You have to look at both sides of the ins and the outs.
Representative Phillips.
Thank you. So, having been a school business administrator a long time ago and not for very long, I understand a lot of the challenges. I'm wondering if you can comment on the training that's available for business administrators so they know that they're supposed to look at the burn rate and how that's different for different parts of the budget. And then do they know they should be presenting that at every school district meeting?
Sure. I know that the New Hampshire ASBO has a training program in place where they actually will pair a new BA with a mentor. And they also have their certificate program to help prepare a upcoming BA for what's coming out of them. The certificate program is great. However, to say that it's flawless, I can tell you that some of the bigger stories in the state this year had somebody with the certificate program and it didn't work out. The mentor, I think that's really a very valuable asset. And again, I don't want to speak for my colleagues. I know in our firm, we encourage, whether it's finance director, BA, whoever, if something comes up during the year, we want to hear from you. We don't want to hear about it in July if it's something that a 5-minute conversation could have helped in September or October. So you have networks available to new BAs that help develop them. I've even heard that the state DOE, Department of Education, is planning on taking a bigger role in this as well because they see the problem, the deficiencies that are out there. I don't think it's a case of people not wanting to do a good job. I think it's a case that the job has really grown into a very massive list of responsibilities, and they just need help understanding how do you address these.
We have many districts. We have 109 SAUs in the state and a lot of districts beyond that. What's the cost of an audit to these school districts? I know from small to large, it probably varies, but yeah, when I was chair of a select board, we used to do around $14,000 back then for the audit. But that's a small town. What's an SAU or a school district have to put in the budget for this?
Again, I think it depends, which I know is not the answer you're looking for. It depends on the audit firm you get. There are certain clients where we just can't put a proposal in. We look and say, based on the demands of this request, we just can't fulfill it, and we're not going to do bad work for a client. What happens then is you see some of the out-of-state firms come in. I've got a town that recently went out to bid. We looked at it and said, we can't do this one. They were previously paying something south of $30,000. They're now closer to $70,000 for their annual audit. I mean, it's a doubling cost when we're bringing in these out-of-state firms. The other issue that we're having is that with the continuing GASB requirements, the training that all these firms have to now provide to their staff to make sure that they're able to even produce a compliant audit, that comes at a cost. The implementation of these new GASB pronouncements, that comes at a cost. So the cost of producing an audit has gone up substantially. And to answer your question, if you have just that general baseline, it's tough because the size and complexity of the entity makes a difference.
Thank you. Representative Burton, then Representative Colcom.
To follow on that, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for taking my question. What would this bill cost with the additional amendments if you've seen it? Because it places more requirements on the school districts and the entities reporting.
We've had some internal discussions on this. If it passes as the 6 months, we would have to reevaluate our client list and then go back to the clients that we plan on continuing to work with and letting them know that the cost will be higher because now we're shortening the window. It's not a path we want to go in. As I said, we as a firm believe that we play a valuable role in this industry.
Representative Copeland?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for taking the question. What happens, you guys do your opinion letters and then you do the legal letter. What happens when year after year you're identifying the same problem? For example, let's say capital assets aren't being tracked properly and depreciation's not being recorded. And that's a repeated opinion that's given year after year. What happens then?
That's a really good question. I do want to apologize because you were continuing on your question last time and I interrupted you, so I didn't mean to do that.
I was told, I didn't read this before asking questions.
Oh, no, that's fine.
I was listening. As you should.
So if a finding continues to go on for years on end, capital assets is a good one. We will a lot of times have a very candid conversation with the decision makers and say, you know, you're a large community. There's no excuse for this. You need to get this done. I'm proud to say, for example, the town of Hudson, this had been a comment for them for many years, and that was a conversation I had with a few board members and the town administrator. They've resolved that this year. I recently was at a meeting where I had gone through all the findings that we had, and one of the board members said, Mr. Campbell, can I ask you a question? Go right ahead. What are you going to do about this? We have no authority beyond that. The one thing we can do is if we think it's an area that is a high-risk area, we can discontinue the relationship with that client. We do have one client, and I won't say names, who has given us probably 30 variations on the cash reconciliation for 1 year. That audit is going to be issued as it stands with a very bad opinion and then a letter saying we're going to discontinue this relationship because they're in charge of the public tax dollars. They have to be concerned with the public interest. And when a client doesn't do that, they're too high of a risk for us. So it would depend on the criteria of the finding. Another one that's common is the local OPEB portion. I've made no bones about this. I think the OPEB shouldn't even be in the financial statements. I think it completely misstates the financial position of the government. But I also understand that the highway has a speed limit of 65, and if I'm pulled over doing 75, I'm going to pay the ticket. So I don't like it, but I comply with it.
What's OPEB?
Other post-employment benefits. Yeah, those are some of the big numbers that show up on your statement of net position, the government-wide financial statements.
Wow, a lot of food here. Last question, Representative Damon, and then we're going to, there's other people like to testify too today.
That's fine.
What's your bill going to be?
Not bad, I promise. I'll let you know later. Why don't you guys give me a few names?
So first of all, thank you very much. You're
Thank you.
good communicator, and I think I can speak for the committee, very helpful to us. I'm not sure this is an answer for right now, but I was already thinking it, and then you spoke about the Department of Education possibly being more involved in school district business operations. And so I would be interested to hear what, if anything, should be in statute or in rules, maybe it does or does not belong in statute, that would have the department enhance local district operations without overtaking them. If you have thoughts now or later, that would be
I think
great.
it's probably something for later. I'd like to collect my thoughts on that.
I'll look forward to that.
Yeah.
No, you're going to say thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much, and I hope that you give some consideration to the handbook also if that needs updating.
Okay.
So if I could respond to that real quickly, Plozig and Sanderson has been contracted with the state of New Hampshire. I'm not currently on that project, but we are helping redo the handbook for school administrators. So that is something that we are currently doing. I think we finished the first part of the contract and we're continuing through it. I know Cheryl Pratt she's basically been leading it from our firm. Anyone who's worked with our firm probably knows Cheryl. This is a passion of hers. She really she's been waiting for this opportunity, and she's really taken the lead on it. She's come up with some really good ideas. So I think you'll have something very nice to look at very soon.
Well, thank you very much. We really
you.
appreciate your time and testimony.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
We have several folks here from Stoddard. Do you want to do it together, Scott and Tim, or do you want to do it singularly, or?
We'll do it together. But we're not sitting in the same seat.
But that's fine. It's not working well at all. The blue seat is the love seat.
I see that. It's lovely. So
Introduce yourselves.
I'm Tim Rohr, and I'm the CFO for Keene School District, SAU 29. I've been there for 25 years. I've worked with Cheryl, as mentioned earlier, for many years. Scott works for me. Go ahead, Scott.
I'm the business manager for SAU 29. I've been there for 8 years, and I've worked with Cheryl from Plawsic and Sanderson for all 8 years.
I also work with another audit firm currently, Vashon and Kluge. And we read this bill, and we weren't exactly sure the motivation behind the bill. But if it's to make school districts more accountable, figure out issues sooner, that's all commendable. I'm not sure that the bill as written actually achieves that, and there's things in there that are surprising. I don't think that if you pass this bill, most districts and municipalities, or many, would be out of compliance, because I don't think there's enough auditors in the state to get everyone done in 6 months. The audit firms in the state, there's some good ones, but they can't serve all the clients now. They refuse business all the time. If you had an audit when I first started this industry, it would be about max 18 pages long. Now you're talking 60 pages. You think, oh, there's more value in that. OPEB's just one example. There are things in there that would mean nothing to anyone reading it, maybe even a person in business, because you look at a municipality and a school district different than you look at a private company. But we essentially have very similar standards. Even depreciation will be looked at differently for us as it would for a private company. I mean, a bank's not going to be able to repossess a bridge to get their money back. So does it really matter how much value is left in that bridge for a loan? It might matter for other reasons, but not for that reason. So it feels like a wider group of folks need to get together, including the Department of Ed, to figure out and have a list of stated issues that you're trying to solve. But for example, they work on payroll. They want to make sure payroll is done correctly in audit. And an audit doesn't manage your schools or run your finances, but they're a great tool. I use them all the time. I want to find issues because I can't fix them. So they test a lot of stuff. Do we have purchase orders in place prior and things like that? But they don't run your schools. The issue, like Claremont, for example, was more with the management. And that the audit wasn't done for several years is symptom enough to know that it wasn't being managed well. You didn't need an audit to tell you that. You realize when they're behind 3 years in filling out their end of the year reporting that they're not being managed well. And so there may be a law or a legislative solution, but I don't think this is it for what problems I think you're trying to solve. We're at a state now in New Hampshire, and I probably wasn't lost on you, where you're not required to have a financial audit for real. There are districts and towns that have an elected auditor who may have zero qualifications. They just need to win the election. There could be 15 people voting by hand. Yep, put them in. I worked for a district that did that and argued about getting a CPA firm. I actually finally got them to change that, and we were able to catch fraud by another elected official through that process. And Plawsic and Sanderson was our auditors on that. So they have a role, but having a false timeline to get it done, sometimes an audit can be very difficult and take a long time. I still don't have my audit back. We engaged in late September last year. My audit's not signed, sealed, and delivered today. I try to have it done before the last meeting of the year in June. I do give financial reports, revenues and expenses, and projections for year and every year. It's really important. You have to do that to rightfully go to voters to ask for a new budget. In New Hampshire, one of our most important revenue source is surplus from the year before. If you don't know where you stand or where you're going to stand, you can't tell someone that, because of course that becomes a revenue for your next year. So you can give an accurate tax projection at voting time, which is really important in schools. Less important on the municipal side, because they decide what they're going to give back at the time of tax rate setting. But in schools, we have to give it all back. There are some provisions now where you can keep some percentage, but schools is much more exact. You take all of your surplus and that becomes a revenue for next year. So you're giving a very detailed revenue and tax projection for the next year. So if you're not doing that, you're not doing your job. But an auditor, it would be like getting the police to drive your car for you because you got a speeding ticket. You have to drive your car according to the laws. It's nice to have the police out there enforcing those laws. The auditor can help us find those issues and dig into those issues, but it's no substitute for management of the schools.
Any further? You're acting as team here? Okay. Yes, Representative Popovich.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Same question, and thank you for being here and testifying. Same question that we were asking of the previous person testifying. If 6 months is not appropriate, what would be a reasonable time period that would allow this process to be done in an orderly fashion?
I mean, I think first you would need a law that says you have to have a third-party CPA firm audit, which you don't have. Second, I wouldn't add more stuff to an audit that's already onerous with new GASBs coming out all the time. And third, you might want to put a time by which you have to start that audit, but to finish the audit is variable. So I would not put a timeline on when you finish an audit, because all kinds of things can go into that. You have a lawyer who doesn't answer a question. You have, because it requires a lot of tests and letters to go out, and the lawyers have to write back, yep, there's no legal issues to account in the audit. You're relying on a lot of other people and workload. If you have an audit firm that's your auditor and 3 of their reps quit, your audit may take longer than you had thought. There's just all kinds of things that go into it. But I would think a year is a reasonable time, not the final extension. I would like it faster. I would like it by the end of that school year so I can present to my board that's sitting. So it's not ancient news. But the stuff that if they begin the audit on time, you're already making corrections. You're not waiting for that report. You're already signing stuff that said, hey, we tested 45 POs and 10 of them, the POs were done after the invoice came in. That's against your internal controls. We're already making those changes as we go. So it's the start of the audit that's important, not the finish of the audit, because no one is voting based on the audit. I would get any of you to pick up an audit from your local district or school and read it and tell me if you feel like you know more about that district. It'd be tough to tell.
I'm sure that'd be you.
And do you find it really informative?
Don't ask her that question, because
Okay, sorry.
she'll read it front to back and back to front.
I think it's very difficult without some financial training to understand the audit. It's a different accounting system in a way that it's not telling you plainly what revenues and expenses are. It's got a lot of stuff in it that you wouldn't recognize. What you want to know is, what was your budget? What did you spend? What did you overspend and underspend? That's hard to tell in an audit. You can find it, but it's not easy, and it's diluted by a lot of other standards. I think it would be good if you looked at one, because I don't think this will be a solution to the problem that you're trying to fix.
Representative Phillips?
Thank you. So I know you have a lot of districts in your SAU, and I'm wondering if you have any districts where the population is less than 750 people, and because of that, they're allowed to do a simplified report instead of an audit, and is that okay? Or
We have some small districts, and we have Keene, but we have no one who takes that path. We now have every one of our districts do a full CPA audit. I don't know of any that take that path.
Representative Damon?
Thank you for being here and helping us. And my colleagues' expertise is different from many. Like some people speak German and most people don't in this room. So my question is, how are school board members, primarily school board members and administration even, that may not speak that audit language, how best are they communicated with, and is there anything in this proposed legislation that either helps or hinders that communication process?
Well, they're not required to, but not only do all of our board members get our audits, I have our auditors come to the board meeting. I used to just have them come once every other year because it's difficult to get them to come. But because of Zoom and after COVID, I have them come every year and I use a Zoom room and remote them in. And then I always invite them to speak with their auditor in non-public without administration and myself there. Because the audit, they're not employees. They're independent contractors. And so they should be viewed as someone you can talk to about my services and financial services, so that they need to know from a third party, am I doing my job, essentially, right? And so I think those two things are important, which I don't think take place everywhere, but I think that's an important piece.
Yes.
Thank you, that's very helpful. So just to confirm what I think you more or less recommended, if the school board members have the opportunity to meet in non-public with the audit, that is somewhat of a performance review for the business management of the SAU or the school district.
That they should be doing that. I've done that in any board that I've sat on, and I would encourage all board members to do that.
Thank you.
Why would you suggest non-public?
I was quoting him, I wasn't
Oh,
suggesting.
because I would think that this be, for transparency and the public, it would be open.
Mostly performance conversations are done in non-public.
Personnel matter.
Well, if you're going to get down to the personnel stuff, yes. Yeah.
I would have that conversation.
Yeah. Okay.
There should be an avenue where they can say, from a high level, they're not going to look at your whole job performance. I mean, I do thousands of things that aren't contained in an audit. But on the financial side, I think that they should be asked, do you have any concerns about the employees? Are you getting what's not happening? I think that's important. As a third party, you're paying them a lot of money. It won't be in the opinion. If you've read audit opinions, it reads, it's fairly stated, right? So I think those kind of things are important and you can get more value. If a lot of people in my job would like clean opinions all the time, I do not. I'm paying that much money for them to come in. I want to find something I can improve, right? And that's the way I think that should be the standpoint. It's not a gotcha, but if you're not getting them to find problems, then you're not getting much value out of it. I don't need a 60-page report to say everything looks great. I want to have a 60-page report that says you could be doing better on this.
Representative Spilsbury and then Representative Bricky first, then Representative Spilsbury. She had her hand up way before you.
I had my hand up first. Thank you very much.
Ladies before gentlemen.
Thank you. So this is a question for you because I was listening intently and I missed it. But you said there were 3 things that should be changed about this bill. One, it should be the time to start the audit is what's important, not the time to finish it. Don't put anything new into the audit because there's already enough requirements from GASB. What was the third thing? Do you remember? 'Cause
Maybe not.
Okay. I can't either, and I'm sorry. Yes, I'll have to go back to the recording, but thanks, that's okay.
I'm sorry.
No, you're
I
fine.
don't remember my third point.
And I looked it up.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, good.
I do remember now. So the basic thing is that we don't require audits, CPA audits in New Hampshire.
Right.
And when I read this, I was kind of astonished because we don't even require them. But if you do get one, you need to get it done faster and add more to it.
Gotcha.
Which seemed crazy because if you can't find an auditor, then you're going to elect an auditor and not do one rather than
Right.
be out of compliance.
This sounds like a case for.
We don't
interim
require
study.
CPA.
No, you do
When
not.
I was chair of the Water Commission Enterprise Fund, we had to have it audited every year.
You're required to have the services of an auditor. It can be a CPA or an elected auditor with zero qualification. They don't have to have zero. The bar is zero
It's a
qualifications.
municipal position too, for
Yeah.
school.
And schools and municipalities.
Okay.
Although, if you're a big district and you have a federal fund over $1 million, then that's going to require a much more in-depth audit of just that fund, which can take a very long time. So yeah, I realize we have great auditors and we work with two great firms, but the amount of work that has to be done and the number of capacity that New Hampshire has, you could not get this work done for the whole state.
Representative Spilsbury.
I guess I just want to draw a sharper line on something that you said. The audit is after the fact. They tend to be obscure. They tend not to be understandable unless you have some training and experience. They tend not to be understood unless you read the notes. And auditors, it seems to me, are as much driven by the idea of coaching and revising processes so that things are done right for the future. Catching the current problems is a way of getting there, right? But so I'm just wondering whether you would agree that maybe the objectives of this bill would be better fulfilled not from tightening the requirements of a post hoc audit being submitted to the Department of Education, but by rather better defining what is the ongoing process between the BA and the school board. What kind of active operational financial reporting would we expect to regularly come before the school board in order that they can fulfill their responsibilities real time?
I agree with you. I agree that is what's important. And there are rules. I think you'd want to look at what already is required. But a monthly financial statement, projections, a lot of people make mistakes on how they spend and account for federal funds, and then they lose the money in the end. That's a big problem. Budgeting is super important, which happens at the same time the audit. I don't think I can understate how much work it is to put together a budget. It's the operational side that has to be fixed. And this is testing those operations after the fact. I agree.
Thank you.
Thank you. Last question for this group. Representative Burton.
You heard thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for taking my question. You heard the previous speaker speak to the increase in the cost to the auditor when you add requirements. What are the increased costs to the people in the organization? Because my experience was you pretty much have to you stop operations while it's your staff that does all the retrieval of records and so forth. So there isn't a cost. Is there a cost to the college or the school districts to comply with these, as well as the cost to the auditor's fee?
Yeah, my experience is probably like everyone on this panel. We just work more hours. And often it's hard to distinguish what that is. The DOE 25, you've talked about numerous times. That has gotten much more complicated. The main form I can do in a few days or less. But sometimes I'm working on that thing for a month or two or Saturdays because the federal accounting of that has just gotten really difficult, and we don't have the account numbers to distinguish the information they're looking for. Makes it a lot of handwork and very difficult. So those kind of things. But it really wouldn't say that it costs my district more money. It's just more time. And there is a cost to that if I have to work overtime, like I have employees that work overtime, but it's negligible. That's just the way of doing things. I couldn't put a number to it. But the audit is getting more expensive, not because of something the state has done, but GASB has, 100 proclamations that they didn't have maybe not 100, 70 more than they didn't have 25 years ago. That's why it costs more.
For me? Go ahead.
Thank you. Are we going to be doing, I know this is a bill that we have to turn around quickly due to the schedule. Are we going to be doing a work session on this? Because based off of the conversations from the last two, I have more questions that I would really like to ask the auditor that I think tie into what we're trying to get, such as the audits tying to the MS-22, which are the appropriations that we approve. So
Yeah, and it just, a lot of questions just happened to me too, and I was thinking about how do you audit special education, residential placements, homebound situations when you're dealing $1 out of every $4 that we spend on education, on education, is special education. And then you have federal in there, you got state in there, you got grants in there, you got everything else in there. And But answering your question here, are we going to meet? Well, we got Saturday and Sunday, and then we have
paid
the room
overtime.
next Tuesday. We have, and then we have to have this bill out that day, or possibly Wednesday. So it's this is an early bill that just came on our doorstep here a week ago, and so unfortunately, we get things from the Senate that are half baked. And now we have it here, and we have to bake the rest of it, and there's not a lot of time to bake it. So,
thank you.
process dealing with scheduling or what?
We can dismiss our witnesses.
Yeah, I think you guys go back, sit down.
Thank you guys very much. And I appreciate everyone's thoughts on
We
this.
still have another pink card. We have another pink card.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Let's let that
Study in the second year, and if we can, when does it get addressed?
Yeah, we can do that. We can do that, but it gets addressed normally between now and the end of June if you have all your bills out of your committee. If not, it has to be taken care of sometime in the fall, usually from September through the end of October. Not a lot of time. But if I ask for a show of hands here, how many people want to come back here this summer and work? None hands will go up.
Oh, but maybe.
Tracy, your hand's up because you're just going the opposite direction. Okay, yeah. Okay, we're going to go on with the next person. I'd like to have Dr. Green come up from the Department of Education, and he says he has all the answers.
Everything.
On DOE 25.
How come he didn't come first?
I don't want to answer that.
We didn't know the questions yet. Right, okay, that's good.
$46,700 for our audit this year. We have 2,200 students.
I'm sorry, Tracy.
What? No, we can all show how much we're spending on an audit.
Yeah.
And I think we can get that from the department as well.
Yeah.
Welcome, Dr. Green.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. For the record, my name is Dr. Nate Green. I'm a division director with the New Hampshire Department of Education. There's a memo going around here. The memo was put together by Mark Manganello, another department employee who I know this committee is very familiar with. He sends his regrets and apologies that he can't be here today. He may or may not be on vacation somewhere nicer than here. So you get me. I think, the concerns that I have, the concerns that the department have been brought up by the previous couple of speakers. So I'm not going to go through and read the whole memo, but I am going to point out a couple of things. The biggest one is that I think the work that this bill is trying to do, which is focusing on audits, it's focusing on timelines for audits and where the information of those audits is going. I don't argue that that's not a bad thing. That is a good thing. Historically, traditionally, audits have gone to DRA. They have not gone to Department of Education. So one of the things that we would have to look at, and I believe it's part of the fiscal note that was submitted here, is for the Department of Education to start collecting audits and analyzing the data and publishing those. We would need additional resources at the department in order to do that. So that is a component of the fiscal note here, only because, again, traditionally those audits have gone to DRA. They have not gone to Department of Education. So that's one piece. But the other piece of it is the bill here is modifying Roman numeral 3. As has been part of the conversation this afternoon here, Roman numeral 3 is what the Department of Education refers to as the DOE 25. We have very, very strong concerns about any edits and changes to that particular paragraph, whether it's the form and substance of what's being submitted or the deadline. In order for the department to effectively work with DRA to help get tax rates set for municipalities across the state, we need that September 1st deadline, and we need the information that's submitted within those DOE 25 reports. So if I could make a recommendation, which again, I think has been part of the conversation this afternoon, I think the work that this bill is trying to do could be done possibly in a different statute or a new statute, but I think it's trying to overlay itself on top of the DOE 25 statute. And that's creating problems. It creates problems for the work that the Department of Education has to do every year in terms of getting those tax rates and that information out with DRA. So again, I just want to express those concerns. And then the other piece that I will put out here, and then I'll pause for questions. When Mark and his team had worked with DRA to take a look at the audits that are coming in, if we were to adhere to the 6-month deadline here, it's about 7% of districts within the state that they estimate would be able to get those in within that 6-month timeline. The Department of Education, if we were to move forward with the language that's here but change the timeline, would recommend something closer to a 12 to 18-month timeline in order to allow those audits to be able to come in to the Department of Education. So I will pause there, and I am happy to take any questions from the committee.
Questions from the committee? Representative Damon.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for being here and being surrogate for Mark. So if I'm understanding correctly, it sounds like the department, one of the department's recommendations is to leave Roman numeral 3 the way it currently is in statute, so it does not change the requirements for the DOE 25, and separately address audit requirements. Am I understanding that correctly?
That would be my recommendation, yes.
I'll pause.
Representative Bricky.
Thank you. Thank you very much for taking my question. Were these concerns brought before the Senate when the Senate debated this bill?
I believe that there was discussion. I would have to go back and take a look because again, I'm here today sort of filling in for Mark. So when it was at the Senate, it likely would have been someone from the Bureau of School Finance, but I can find out if there was a representative from the department there.
Thank you.
Within the financial report, we have here, Nate. For FY24, 55% of the districts returned an audit within 12 months. Why did the other 45% not?
Well, I think one of the reasons is, what this bill is trying to get at, which is imposing very specific deadlines and potential consequences. So when we start talking about withholding state aid or grant funds, there's an incentive there for districts to meet those deadlines. So I do think that there is a place for having deadlines and for having carrots and sticks when we're talking about that. Right now, without those components, districts tend to work with the auditors on the district's time, on the auditor's time, and audits kind of come in across a range of deadlines. Without actually talking to a specific district, it'd be difficult to say why any one district was longer or shorter than what they're currently turning audits in for.
And I'll follow up to that. You've heard me speak many times how I worked with Perry Plummer on Homeland Security, and we were handing out public school infrastructure grants. And when we were handing the grants out, we had a requirement that they have their emergency management plans in. We found out that 20% of the districts had responded and 80% had not. And Perry said immediately, if you want a grant, get your reports. And 2 weeks later, they are all in. Now, what kind of hammer or do you have? I use the word hammer all the time, but what kind of process do you have in place to get these things in when you're setting a deadline? Because we're looking at, if it's 55% doing it and 45% not, we have a problem.
So again, the way the current process works, those audits do not go to the New Hampshire Department of Education. That's a process with Department of Revenue. So I wouldn't be able to speak to sort of the historical process, but this bill would be changing aspects of that where the Department of Education would be responsible for collecting either the financial audit reports or audits themselves. Again, our biggest concern is the overlay with the idea of collecting audited reports and how that is sort of being mixed in here to what the DOE 25 is, which is financial reporting that the department needs to be able to set tax rates, and it is not itself audited financial reports. Collecting audits, I think, is a very good thing. But again, I think we need to be careful about where that's being inserted into the current statute.
Representative Spilsbury?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It's always seemed to me that audits are most useful, if at all, to the local decision makers. This bill doesn't seem to me to create much of a role for the Department of Education. Yes, it redirects the audits, but lines 17 and 19 says the commissioner of the Department of Education shall verify that the report appears complete within 6 months of receipt, comparing against those submitted in prior years. That leaves me scratching my head a bit. What is it that would take 6 months if it was only to verify that it was reasonably complete? And what, if anything, would we really want the DOE to do with these other than to verify that they're complete?
That's a good question. I think I'm not sure because some of that speaks to intent. So one, we'd have to determine what is a reasonable definition of completeness, and then what does that mean? Is that being reported out? Do we only publish ones that have been determined to be reasonably complete? Do the other ones get kicked back to the district? I'm not sure of the answer to that. From a process perspective, I'm looking at that and saying, as we're adding that as a component on, we would need a person, but the person would be sitting there reading audits to determine if they are complete. And so to your point, I'm not entirely sure I could speak to the value of that, other than I would need to have a person come in over that 6 month period to look at those audit reports and publish them.
Follow up?
You can sense my skepticism, so I'm not trying to push you to give us more of an answer, but are there other things that you think it would be useful for that DOE staff to do with these reports beyond simply acknowledging that they're complete or sending them back if they're not complete?
I think that there are components of technical assistance and support that the department can play a role in. Again, we would need the ability and the resources to go through those audits and identify potential deficiencies or potential patterns across multiple audits, and then to be able to reach out to superintendents, to business administrators, to school boards to provide direct technical assistance around that. That's a very different role, though, than just verifying and determining whether or not audits are complete.
Go ahead.
Very brief follow-up. It seems to me that one of the essential elements of the CPA firm's role is to verify they're complete.
I guess one of the problems that I have, and it's really not been answered here. What is the purpose of the DOE 25 form?
Setting tax rates.
That's the only reason then. So submitting it to DRA, yes, but to the department, what's the department going to do with it? Are you going to check to see what the average cost per pupil is and what adequacy is and all this other stuff? You know, what's an expense related to adequacy? What's not related to adequacy? You know, if it's not being used that way, then, you know, I think some people are, you know, including myself, are misunderstanding.
So the financial information that we collect from the DOE 25s is published in a variety of different ways. It's made available, both the DOE 25s themselves are made available, as well as the department takes a lot of that information and does financial reporting back out. So there is a level of transparency, I would say, that goes beyond just the primary purpose of setting those tax rates. The reason I say tax rates as my first answer to that question is one of the most important reasons that we take the data from those DOE 25s and use it. But there's a lot of data and reporting that we gain from the DOE 25s that without having those financial reports, the department would not have transparency into.
Difference between the audit and the DOE 25.
Yeah. It's sort of like the IBAS report that doesn't get submitted. Representative Colcom.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm going to try and form a question in this somehow, but I agree in that the DOE and the DOE 25 and the audit are different in a lot of aspects. And it was my understanding that the DOE 25 also did frame up the average cost per pupil. But if I'm wrong in that, but I think one of the problems that I think we're trying to solve here has to do with how we're accounting and expending for our money. And I will use my example, which I'm sure you've heard, the greenhouse example from our school district, and that our school district spent $122,000 building a greenhouse that we never appropriated money for on the MS-22. And then they turned around and they accounted for it through repairs and maintenance and through gas fittings and other things. So they never put it into the right things, and they buried into repairs and maintenance. And our audit never caught that. So the audit isn't fixing some of the problems that I think we're really trying to resolve through some of this legislation. And it wasn't until I reached out to the auditor saying, hey, how did you miss this greenhouse? Now, he was given a list of capital assets to add to the thing, but I'm guessing, I'm certainly not saying that it was wrongdoing. He never looked at how those capital assets were expended. And had they looked at maybe the MS-22 and saw that we didn't, or had they looked at where did these accounting numbers go for this greenhouse building, maybe they would have caught it. In the end, I did end up getting the opinion that they violated RSA 3210 on how they appropriated funds. But none of what we're talking about through the MS-25 or the audit is really going to help solve that. And every call that I made to the DRA and the DOE, they all said we have no jurisdiction. So they recognized that this was a problem and they had no jurisdiction over it. So in my opinion, that's where I think we need to start fixing some of these problems, is that when we bring this to the school board's attention, to the DOE's attention, to the Department of Revenue's attention, we've got to give them the ability to help get involved before the building goes up and it's too late. So, would you believe?
Would you believe? There you go. There's your question. Representative Bricky.
Thank you very much. And do you believe that this bill is fixing those problems, any of those problems?
I think that there's a little bit more nuance to that. I think that there are real problems with fiscal oversight that aren't necessarily going to just be solved with one thing. I think that the department has testified on a number of bills this legislative session that has dealt with, in one form or another, fiscal oversight, whether it's at a school level, whether it's talking about responsibilities of school boards, whether it's talking about SAU budgets. So I think there are aspects of audited financial reports that provide transparency and provide information to communities and to taxpayers. I think the DOE 25 provides vital information to the Department of Education and supports the state in determining adequacy amounts and determining tax rates. There are things that we are currently engaged in to try to make the process better, things like updating the chart of accounts and the accounting handbook at a state level, which has not been updated in several years. That will help to mitigate some of these issues. The department has been working to try to increase some of the staff within its bureau to provide better direct technical assistance and support to schools and districts. It was talked about a little bit this afternoon that we are seeing more BAs than normal are leaving the profession or retiring, which is requiring the Department of Education to have to step in and answer more questions and provide more direct help to districts who are working through BA transitions or who are trying to find BAs. So I don't think just one single thing is going to be the silver bullet that solves that. But I see things within this bill that are trying to get to that. That's possibly a long-winded answer that I don't know if that answers your question, but.
This bill, follow up.
The department's not to take a position on it.
True, you're right. Thanks.
Any further questions right here of the department? Not seeing any. Thank you very much. Charlie,
Thank
do you have any pearls of wisdom for this committee?
Not about this.
Oh, not about this one. Okay, you've been in this business a long time. Okay.
Thank you.
Are there any other pink cards for 586? Gone. So we are now closing this hearing on 486, and we have some time here available to work on a work session here. We have several bills. Pardon me? We can take a 5-minute break here, and I know it's going to be 10 minutes, but take a few minutes and yeah. You could think it's hot in here. Go down the other end of the building. Okay, we're going ahead with our work session right now. First one we're going to start out with is 580. Relative to establishing a school cooperative purchasing program. We had this bill introduced last week, and unfortunately, I was not at that hearing. I was busy with Senator Ward across the way with another Senate hearing, so missed this one totally. This bill really has a whole lot of different components within it. Right through section 3, where it starts changing from the cooperative school district stuff into other issues. So let's have some discussion on it. Where are folks on this thing? Mr. Arlinghouse, you're here because of 580. Charlie, would you like to come on up and give us your focus? You've been in you've been in education, the business of government and governor's office and all that for years here, so.
Yes, because I'm old.
You're just a young guy.
Let's go with that. I'm a young guy. I think and I apologize, we didn't do anything in the Senate on this bill, and it frankly escaped my attention. I know there's a fiscal note provided, and some people have talked to various people in my office, but I think I don't know nothing about most of the bill.
Okay.
But the first 4 sections about what the director of procurement does, which is one of my people, I can talk about. And so I think the bill envisions, wouldn't it be great if school districts could buy off of state contracts or we could procure for them? Well, they can. I don't know that anyone knows that, but we have something like 400, and I should say I'm Charlie Arlinghouse, I'm the Commissioner of Administrative Services.
Thank you.
I should have led with that, right? You would think eventually and wave to the camera.
I apologize.
It's okay.
You know, of course, I know you and a number of us do, and your face is very familiar around the Capitol building.
No, it's okay. You don't need to have any idea. It's much better that way. We do all the boring things in state government, admin services, including buying stuff. We have something like 480 contracts in procurement, which are statewide contracts for services and commodities, for example. Not single agency contracts, but statewide contracts. In virtually all of our contracts, there's a provision in the law that allows towns, school districts, SAUs, and certain nonprofits, 501c3s, to buy off of the statewide contract if they so choose. I don't know that very many people do. People do. I don't know that. I asked in preparation for today, I said to one of our purchasing agents, how would they know? And someone said, well, if they went to the state website and looked at the contract, they would see that language. And I said, so that's a way of saying they don't. But what we could do, I think that if you instituted a program where our purchasing bureau suddenly started doing contracts cooperatively for school districts, we would have to significantly increase the number of staff we have, dramatically so. Because it would be a lot more contracts, and contracts are a lot of work. In fact, we struggle right now, certainly with the hiring freeze, but every week the executive council has a new thing they want us to do. So we struggle to keep up.
Charlie, can I interrupt just for a second?
Yeah.
I'm seeing this a work session. When you talk about these contracts, are you talking about equipment, capital or food services, transportation services that schools may have? Or are you talking maybe like more supplies?
We do a little bit of everything, right? So anything state government does that crosses a departmental line where 2 departments do it, not one, we buy aggregates, we buy crime scene cleanup services, we buy office supplies. You'd be surprised. Crime scene cleanup turns out to be anything complicated. So if you touch drugs or human waste, it becomes, I think we probably call it something else now, like special services or something. But yes, but You'd be shocked at what we buy. I talked for 20 minutes at the executive council 2 months ago about donuts. Right? It was a big multi-million-dollar contract nobody cared about, but the donut contract captured people's interest. The Veterans Home buys donuts. A couple of places buy donuts. It's on the list of baked goods. It's a baked goods contract you can use. We have contracts on 480 contracts on you name it. And so what we could do also is if by some chance there's something that doesn't cover what school districts want, we could do that. But in the meantime, I think a better approach would be, I think, for us to tell school districts that you can buy off of any of our contracts. And I think we could work with, I suspect DOE does regular outreach to school people, business administrators, superintendents, I don't even know what, and just get the word out. And we have meetings sometimes with local purchasing agents in towns and things, but I don't know that we've done anything formal. So we could do that. I think that's a much cheaper way of allowing districts to access the state purchasing power. We have a contract and we just say you can use it. We do that now and they just don't very much. And we just need to get the word out. I think if you did that, you wouldn't need the first 4 sections of the bill. I think it's the first 4. And we wouldn't need additional staff. If you do pass the bill, I would need 6 to 10 purchasing agents.
Just go ahead, Representative Damon.
Thank you, and thank you very much for being here. It's nice to meet you in person.
Sure.
I'm a little puzzled that if it's publicized to school districts that they can benefit from the state contracts and work through your department, you don't need additional staff, but this purchasing would require considerable additional staff. I'm surprised you wouldn't need additional staff either way.
Well, what would happen under where I say I don't need additional staff is there are contracts as they exist. They would be publicized. They're all listed on the web. And what would happen is the school district would just call WB Mason, let's say, and order stuff off of contract 18624 or whatever. And the work on our side, we don't do anything. The spend, we would have to track the spend because the way it's done now is at the council is a limit on total spend. So we might have to tweak that a little bit and just track it, but WB Mason would help us track. So it wouldn't be dramatically more work for us. Most of the work would be on their end.
Yes, follow.
But if you want to give me a position, I'll take it.
If it were up to me, of course.
Yes, Representative McGuire will then take it away next year.
He won't let me give it to you this year. Actually.
Yes, that's probably true too.
So the district would still be paying for the product that they're obtaining. So when you said track the spend, but the executive council, I'm not clear why that.
So the executive council, when they approve contracts, approve a couple of different things, right? They're not approving budget authority. When they approve a contract, they don't say, you now have money budgeted for it. What they're approving is the terms of the contract, which think of it as rates for most contracts. But there's also a limit on that. And so I'm going to use an example. We have an aggregate contract that DOT mostly uses, like 95% of it. And in a good year, when they buy a lot of aggregate, rocks, I guess, and stuff like that, there's a $1 million cap. Theoretically, when you hit 1 million, you need to stop. Do they have the budget to spend more than 1 million? Yeah, but the council has technically said when you hit 1 million, Fred's Rock Company gets no more money unless you come back and do a new contract. In the past, there had been contracts where there were no limits because what you were negotiating was a rate. Mm-hmm. You'd have budget authority to spend, but currently there are limits on almost every contract. And they're very focused on that too. Like don't go to 1.1 million, even if you have budget authority, because we want to stop you at that point.
How often are those contract limits met?
I would say that it's a good question. I would say on about half of our contracts, we struggle with hitting the limit. Like we we have to stop the spend, which is actually a very difficult thing with our computer system, because when multiple agencies are all spending money, you don't know. Like you can run reports that are rolled up eventually. And so I say about half of them we do and half of them we don't. Because the WB Mason contract for office supplies is set at a number that's quite large. And that's a fairly predictable thing. The amount of office supplies we buy doesn't go up and down. We might have a contract for asbestos remediation services, and it's 20 grand, or let's just say 1.2 million one year, 1.4 million the next, 6.8 the year after that, 1.2 because of projects that came up. And you only notice not when the engagement happens, but when the bill gets paid. So how often do we hit those numbers? I would say probably half the contracts we experience that. But the new computer system that we're migrating to, which in theory will go live sometime this calendar year, we don't have a date pick because we're going to go live when it works well, not on an arbitrary day, will make it easier to track that. So I don't think that's really a big issue.
Representative Fellows?
Thank you. So my understanding is that that it's pretty easy to use the system. So if I were one of the business administrators, like the ones that we just heard in the last hour, if I had an account, that pretty much all I have to do is go to the purchase and property page on the website, and if I'm looking for computers, I can just type in the word computers and I will see all the contracts, Dell and whatever other ones you have. And I can also do the same thing with heating oil, if you only type the word heating. And that a lot of those contracts, which could be very useful for school districts, that they're generally set up so that the school district would get a certain discount percentage from the regular price of those goods. Is that correct?
Yeah, some of it's a discount from book price, so to speak, and some of it's just a rate. It's, like heating oil is probably a rate per gallon, and you just get that. Yeah, in fact, we've made significant progress over the last couple of years in making the website more accessible. The last two governors have both had this sense that if I sell teacups, I ought to be able to go to one place on the state internet and figure out what all the teacup contracts are. There aren't actually very many, it turns out, for teacups. But you can go somewhere, and our websites have significantly improved in that ability. But yes, you can, and we want it so you can type heating or heating oil and still find the contract without accidentally putting in a space. But it is very easy to use.
Representative Colcom?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So going back to the maximum widgets that you can buy under a contract, when you were saying you need to separate it, does that mean that the purchasing that may be done by the school districts, if they choose to use this, will now not count towards your maximum number that the Executive Council has authorized, or does that mean it will eat up all of that?
I believe that's a conversation I would have to have with the council, and their whims are not easy for me to predict.
Very kind.
I meant that in a nice way.
Representative Damon? And then Representative Ames.
I'm invisible over here.
I can see you.
It sounds like we can make great advances in this cooperative purchasing endeavor without legislation. Is that true?
Yes.
So what do we need to do to make it happen?
Nothing. Frankly, on sections 1 through 4, and again, I don't know anything about the rest of the bill.
That's right.
You just need to tell me to call DOE and make sure that we get the word out about usage of the contracts. And in theory, I would regard this episode as you telling me you would like school districts to make greater use of state contracts, which they're legally entitled to do now. And then I would go back and work on a plan to do just that.
Sounds good to me.
Okay.
Charlie, I have a question for you. Hypothetically, if we have a number of school districts are looking for Xerox machines or some such beast, and they put contracts out, whether it be a 3-year, 5-year contract, does your department do this as far as setting contracts, for the maintenance and use of these, leasing these Xerox machines, or is that something the school district would have to just buy outright and plan separately from this particular?
We do, so service contracts is a separate thing, right? If we did a commodity contract as a purchase of copiers,
Yeah.
because we can't specify they'd be Xerox, because
Yeah,
other
right.
people get to compete. Just saying. I used the word Xerox as a verb with somebody the other day, and they were way too young and didn't know what that meant. It's very, very depressing. Yes, but the maintenance contract is a sort of a separate matter. And when we bid maintenance, for example, elevator contracts, we have a significant maintenance contract for elevators. And I don't know how often that comes up in schools, but
There's the elevator man right over there.
we should talk because we don't get great service.
Yeah, do you use a New Hampshire company for your elevator service or national?
We generally bid and we've been using, we have a couple of different contracts, and let's just say that who's your company?
I worked for the Stanley Elevator Company for 34 years. Same folks put the elevators in this building.
So Stanley's good. We have Stanley's, we have Otis's, we have, I think TKE does a lot of work with us. Is that an elevator? Yeah. And we should talk because they're just okay. But when we do a service contract, we do locations, right? So there'll be a list of locations you have to bid on. So the same was true of the bread contract, for example. And the bread is open for delivery here and there. If someone adds on, if there's a delivery component of a contract and a district, say, wanted to add to it, it would require an amendment because you're adding a location as opposed to buying a good. Like if you're buying a good where they're going to deliver it to you, there's no contract change. But if there's an additional location to be serviced, like snow plowing, right? Everybody sort of gets that. Like, I need you to plow these 12 parking lots. If I add a 13th, I got to change the contract because you bid based on 12.
Representative Bricky?
My department didn't buy these microphones.
Somebody asked.
The legislature does its own thing. Just saying.
Chain over there.
So my school district is required to put out RFPs whenever they go out for contract. How would that, like, is there something that we could, ta-da, thank you. Is there something that we could put, some way that we could put it in so that, because I don't know that we would get an RFP from the state.
So I think Section 3 of the bill, and it may occur somewhere else, and it is meant to say that if you're using somebody else's procured service, that counts as bidding. And from the state standpoint, we do that as well. There's a national company called, or trade association called NASPO, National Association of State Purchasing something, organizations, I guess. Anyway, we do some contracts with them, and that counts as a bid because they've procured it competitively.
Okay.
So it's not a sole source bid. But so probably that's why that language is in there. And you could have some say, if somebody uses a state contract, it shall be considered to be competitively bid.
Okay, thanks, that helps.
This bill addresses charter public schools, SAUs, districts, and various structures within that whole.
So they could all buy under our contracts. There are some, I'm just going to say out loud, there's some exceptions, right? Like the state health benefit contract?
Yeah.
No.
Well, I was going to ask you, we have independent school, public academies would they have an independent board of trustees that are appointed there, and they take public school students?
Like Co-Brown and,
Yeah.
okay. I think we would regard them the same way. I mean, my sense of the way of we say schools, SAUs. I think our intention is, and I think we also say there's standard language that DOJ has signed off on nonprofits organized under 501c3, I think. Like, I don't think we do C4s or C5s, but C3s could apply and use the state contract. I would regard that as, I don't see anything. For all practical purposes, they're the same thing.
Representative Damon?
Thank you. What is the capacity of your department to add additional contracts if schools need a commodity that is not something you're currently contracted for?
So we could do that. I mean, we have 400 and however many contracts I said, I think it's 480, but we could go to 490 without a great deal of effort. We would work with them. We would put them in the queue with everybody else and I would want to sense that it was the state policy that wanted us to do that. And we could do like I don't even know like what schools would need that we don't do, like a school bus contract or something. Milk, maybe. Milk, we do milk. We would have to add locations, so it's a good point. And so we could work on that. It's very easy to let anyone use contracts we have. It's a couple additional contracts, not a big deal. A bunch of additional contracts, I mean, ideally, think of it this way, a purchasing agent typically manages somewhere between 20 and 30 contracts, depending on complexity. And we currently, because of I have 115 vacancies right now out of 400. And so they're mostly managing about 50 to 80, depending on size. There's a morale issue.
Yeah.
Representative McGuire.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If an authorized entity like a school wanted to use your Mason contract to buy a gross of red ballpoint pens or something, is it obvious to them the procedure to go through to do such a thing?
So I think to the extent that if we're meant to reach out to them to explain that there are these contracts, and because I think 90% of them don't know that there are these contracts that they can use, we would want to tell them how. And for most of our contracts, it's not difficult. Think of it this way. There are 40 to 50 state agencies, depending on how you count, of varying levels of sophistication, right? An agency of 3,000 people has a lot more staff, and an agency of 4 where there's one person doing 8 jobs, and they all figure it out. It's not complicated, and there are places they can call for help.
So follow up. Does Mason, presumably all you're doing is giving them a number of the contract and say, go to website, commercial.mason.com or something like that and enter this number, right? And then you pick pens from the list or whatever, right?
Yeah, so like state employees, the way they would order right now is a certain number of people have a P card, a procurement card, a credit card for the state, and they buy them that way as if they were you or me going to Amazon.
Okay, but follow up. So, but you'd want the bill, the invoice to go to the school, not to the state.
Yes, they would have to sort that. So right now the invoice though there's a place the invoice has to go, right? It has to go to, they don't come to me. Mm-hmm. The liquor invoices go to liquor, and the BEA invoices go to BEA, and the DNCR invoices go to DNCR, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So when you get set up in the system, you get set up with a place to go.
And one final, would Mason know to distinguish between this is a school, therefore they're authorized, as opposed to if I went using the state number and say, no, he can't use that contract, right?
There is I don't know what exactly is done to make sure that happens, but there is a way. There are not people using our contract who don't work for the state. I just don't know the precise mechanism where that control is taking place.
All right, thank you.
Representative Bricky?
Thank you. Thank you for taking another question from me, sorry.
Happy to.
You were talking about food, but the school food program is federal, right?
Yes, although oddly, my department has a surplus food division that actually delivers to schools too, but that's a separate thing.
Okay. All right. I didn't know that. So they could order
There's a warehouse on Store Street that used to be called the New Hampshire Distributing Agency years ago, but is the surplus food program where we get.
So schools could order.
They can order that, but that's separate.
Would
It's a
be
different
separate from
program,
the
yeah.
federal. Thank you.
What kind of savings do it, for example, does the DOE or does Jasper across the hallway here get in agriculture for buying through the state system versus trying to do it himself or herself, Caitlin?
It's a really good question, and we're doing a lot of internal evaluation of that. I think some state contracts are a really good deal where the state saves money, where we negotiate. Sometimes it's the convenience of having a contract where there is a negotiated rate and it's fine. I'm going to use, I'm going to get in trouble, but WB Mason is a really good example. We have a contract with WB Mason, and I don't honestly believe it's cheap. Like if you're interested in buying clipboards, and nobody is anymore but me, or pens, if you look around, you can find stuff cheaper. And there's a process where if you buy boxes, DOJ moved, right? And they moved from the building we tore down into here, and they bought like 8 million boxes. And they went through us, and there's a place to get them cheaper. WB Mason was not the cheapest. And so one of the things we're doing right now is doing a lot of evaluation of our contracts is where are we getting a good deal, where are we getting a really good deal, and where are we just adding convenience? And it's 6 and 1.5 dozen of another. We have the cheapest contract of the people who were willing to bid and go through the state process. And that's often good. And there's a convenience to it that's an efficiency, right? That you're not recontracting, right? Let's say you're putting up drywall here, and it's the legislature, so that they didn't have to follow rules. So, so it's not a specific example, but if you bid every single drywall project separately, you're going to save more on some than the state contract and more on others. But you also have to take the time to contract. If you have a contract, you probably got a pretty good price. Not the best price you could possibly get every time, but you got a good price. And you don't have to contract again every single time you go out. So it's the push me, pull you on purchasing. And it's something we're trying to figure out internally right now is where are we adding the most value and where are we not adding the most value? And it's a hard call sometimes. I mean, I could see a future where we don't have office supply contracts because it's not, you don't get the Quill catalog in the mail anymore. And I'm dating myself again. There's but you look on Amazon, you look on Walmart.com, you look on 3 other office, I don't even know anymore. But you go to Staples and you just see. And so I could see that in the future. But do we get a good deal? Yeah. Is this going to be a great savings for school districts? Probably not. Would it be modest? Yep.
I see state trucks loading up at the state garage, fuel. Do school buses get that same break?
I don't think so.
We do get a government rate.
I think you get a government rate, but I don't think you can use the DOT pumps.
I've never seen them at the DOT pumps.
I think the reason for that, so not on fuel, and the state has an electric contract for our buildings, and so that's also different because it's very specific. But the fuel contract is very different because it's the DOT pumps essentially, and it's pretty much just the state.
Well, sometimes it's a contract, you know, for students, private.
Right.
Yeah, Durham is. So, Representative Fellows?
Yes. Do you have any other programs that schools could take advantage of, like the surplus property, that kind of thing?
So surplus property, so anyone can go buy surplus property, right? Anyone in the public, and auction twice a year, and people are, I ran into Representative McGuire there once. And probably buying knives that we confiscated from airports. We go to all the airports, like not just Manchester, but we go to like 3 different airports and we get whatever they, didn't let you board with. And it's remarkable how many knives. Like I did a tour and I looked through it and I'm like, who tried to get on a plane with that? Like machetes. That's not did you not? Oh, can I not bring this? I'm sorry. I thought, who doesn't get that? But so property, yes, they can go to White Farm and use that. And so, but in terms of other big things, purchasing is probably the biggest thing.
Are there any other questions on the first portions of this Bill 580? You got some toothpaste there?
No, that's a knife.
Oh, okay. Because they took my toothpaste from me.
Now you can take it. You used to.
Yeah, for getting on an airplane. You can't take a large tube of toothpaste. You can take a little one. Yeah. Yeah.
Now, because that's a federal program and the regulations are remarkable. You thought the last hearing, it's like every application is like its own aquifer. It's just remarkable.
Okay, the first part of the bill, which we've discussed now, it's down through page 3 in the middle of the page there, where it starts with 3, a new paragraph.
Mr. Chairman,
I think we're
can I
getting,
go home?
I think we're getting out of your bailiwick
Okay.
here.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Charlie. On page 3, on 580, seeing we're there on line 14, we start talking about required policies that school boards and board trustees, charter schools shall adopt. There's a whole litany of them. Goes right down. That page really continues right through that section. Any discussion on that, Representative Fellows?
Yes. So what I did is I looked up requirements in the rules, and these are almost exactly word for word the requirements that already exist in the rules. There were just like a couple of them had just like an extra sentence added to it, a little bit more detail. And there was one of them that was kind of mixed up. It had to do with the role between the state board, the school board, and the superintendent. So in rules, it says the school board sets the short and long-term goals, and the superintendent kind of implements them. And in the bill that we have, it turned that around. So it had the superintendent setting the goals and the school district implementing it. Didn't make any sense. But other than those, all of those, they match up. They're the same thing. So why do we need them in statutes? They're already in rules, and they've been there for a long time too.
Yes. Well, I'd like to stay on this goals bit for a second here. We've given the local boards the responsibility for developing curriculum. We also have within statute in 193E2A, the curriculum shall present educational goals. It's written right into what you're supposed to be adopting locally for your curriculum. Now, I'm not talking academic standards, I'm talking curriculum. Representative Bricky.
I didn't get that to be about academic goals. When it talked about goals, I thought it meant like the goals that we set for, like my school board every year sets goals for the district. the board sets those goals and then the superintendent puts them, then the superintendent implements them and gets them going.
I guess that's the question. Is this needed? Is it being done?
Yes, that was gonna be my question, is is this bill needed at all? I mean, if the cooperative buying is already there, and these other things that are newly added are already in rules, then why, it's my thought that we don't need Bill SB 580, but that's my thought.
Any further discussion on it, on this section? Yeah. Representative Peoples.
I'm not sure that all the pieces of this bill need to be amended, but most of the conversation when Senator Sullivan was here presenting this was on page 4, starting at line 22, which is the receivership of schools.
Yeah, that's getting down in another section than where I was with the
sorry.
policies. Representative Ames.
I was just going to talk about the receivership. So.
Okay, let's go to receiverships. I think that's going to be the most controversial area in the bill.
Yeah, I don't think it needs to be controversial. I think that the problem with this provision that we have here is that it's just a skeleton. It says it authorizes a receivership without saying a word about what that really means. And it doesn't establish any criteria or standard that would measure the a decision that would enable a decision, let's say, by the State Board of Education or Department of Education to go forward with it, to adopt a quote receivership. It doesn't say what the powers of the receiver would be. It doesn't really give much in the way, I don't think anything in the way of a qualification for the receiver. And it doesn't set any time limits on a receivership, whatever the receivership might be. It just lacks everything that you would want for a receivership. There's a lot that's been written on this question of receiverships, so they're called state takeovers of school districts that are time limited, obviously. And some are called receivership, but others are not. There's just a takeover often for a particular purpose, and sometimes it's academic, and sometimes it's fiscal, or sometimes it's just messing up, and typically there's a time limit and a test that needs to be passed in order to get out of the receivership. But all of that stuff needs to be spelled out in a good statute. And maybe, I think there's probably a very good argument for having something in the toolkit of any state that's got that's into public schools. But if we're going to do that, we need to roll up our sleeves and do the work. And tossing this thing out and adding it to our compendium of Department of Education laws makes no sense at all to me. I mean, it's just way ahead of itself. And so that's my 2 cents worth.
Representative Spilsbury?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm inclined to agree with Representative Ames. Representative Ames shared some thoughts in a Massachusetts statute. And my immediate visceral reaction was that I was staring at a 14-page statute. And that layer of detail on the other end of the spectrum, I'm not sure that that's helpful either.
Yeah.
I'm thinking of the Claremont situation. Effectively, they've taken the bull by the horn and brought in an emergency BA, and they're dealing with it. So I'm not sure what all this adds.
Yeah, exactly.
Is this bill a reaction to Claremont?
The prime sponsor did reference Claremont in her.
See, my concern on all this is that we passed a bill in here which came out of this committee 18-0 unanimously, was passed through the House on a voice vote on providing the department on a financial emergency the ability to work with the school district in developing a plan, a recovery plan. And it didn't take control. It gave some oversight to the department, and it was limited to 1 year, as I recall. And I thought that was a good way of addressing the issue of districts which are needing some help from the department. And I think that was where this committee was too. I think that's the way we should address this. And I think this is another stab at doing something, but a stab a little bit, a bridge too far.
Definitely agree.
I would like to see some triggers or something that.
Yeah.
I think we put all that together in 1816, the bill which we submitted from this committee. And it's now over in the Senate, and I don't know what they're doing with it. Yeah, I testified on it the other day. Yeah, and so I don't know what they've done, whether they've exected or not. I don't think they have.
What's the bill number?
I think it's 1816. I hope I'm not confusing it with something else.
I'm thinking of a different one.
Yeah. This is the one we worked on and came up with this agreeable language. Yes, Representative Damon.
So, taking in our conversation on all three parts of 580, it sounds like we may have consensus that we don't need this proposed statute to go forward, and that potentially we could have an executive session today and be done with it?
I'm still a little bit confused about, I'm sorry.
Go ahead. It's a work session.
Right. I guess I'm still a little bit confused about the conversation that was just had on page 4, line 16, the new paragraph there for the school boards to add this new section. Did I hear correctly that we have this in rules?
Not the SAUs.
So isn't there a benefit to having it in legislation rather than in rules? I mean, right? I mean, we're responsible for what gets put into legislation. We're not solely responsible for what goes into rules. There's other people that add rules in that they're interpreting. So
Nate, can you help us out on this at all? We're talking about the SAU having these policies.
wait a minute, am I in the right section? I'm sorry, I'm in the wrong section. I apologize. It was page 3.
Okay,
line
I was in
14.
Roman 4 there. Okay.
My apologies. Page 3, line 14. That's close.
Well, that's all, that's all these
New Roman
policies.
6. So yeah, this would be added into 189.1 by adding in this new stuff into legislation as opposed to just keeping it in the rules. I think, part of it is that I think that the mainstream, I guess my perception, the mainstream doesn't go to the rules. Mainstream goes to the RSAs. Rules can be changed through GELCAR.
Yeah, the rules have to be echoing a statute. And they're reviewed every 10 years. And I would think that we want to know the statutory reference. It may be a broad reference. But I can't tell you what that reference is right now. I just haven't taken any time to look at it.
I haven't looked at the rules either. I mean,
Some of this may be newer too than when the rules were last adopted. Nate, can you help us out a little bit on any of this? We're looking on page 3, the second half of the page there with all these rules.
starting at line 14
Yeah,
there.
policies, I mean.
Yes, so much of this mirrors what is currently in rules relative to school board duties. Without sort of putting them side by side and taking a look, I would be able to tell you exactly what might be a little bit different here versus what's slightly different in rules. But that would also be my caution, is that we try to say something should either live in statute or in rule. In this case, it is currently in rule. If it's added into statute, we would want to make sure that they're not in conflict with each other, or there might be situations where something is trying to get at the same idea, but it's worded slightly different in the statute than it is in the rule. And so now does it create a situation where school boards have to have two policies that are sort of intended to get at the same thing, but they're worded slightly differently? So it's just a caution that if this were to go forward with these, I would likely want to go back to the State Board of Education and look at the rules to say, are the rules needed based off of what's in the statute? And then the other part of policy, and this is policy specific, is a lot of times statutes will add in a policy language. That'll be, so when we're trying to support school boards or trying to support superintendents and knowing like what are all of the policies you need to adopt, there are a lot of places you have to go and look to know what are all of the policies you need to have, because they get added in lots of different places. So I'm not saying one way or the other it should or shouldn't be in here. Just a caution that we do have policies in a lot of different places, and it's good to make sure that they are consistent with each other.
If I can follow, I guess my feeling on the policies is that it seems to be easier for them to break policy or excuse a policy or override a policy, where maybe it's not as easy for them to excuse or break the law or, override the law, and what's in statute. So I struggle with the policies versus what we have in statute. That doesn't mean I'm right.
Representative Fellows?
Yeah, so I'm on JELCAR. I'm just an alternate, but I have some experience with that. So rules are written to be kind of like the details of what's in statute. So right now we have these are not these are not policies. This is a list of the things that a school board is required to have a policy about. And so it could be everybody's policy is not necessarily the same, but they have to all address, they're supposed to all address these particular issues. And this list has been in rules for a very long time. This section has been in effect at least since 1982. And the last time, and it comes up every 10 years, has to be reviewed. And to do a review, what happens is the agency that's involved, which in our case would be the State Board of Education. It's their job to review these rules, and if they think something needs to be changed, then that goes to JELCAR, who here gets public input on keeping it the way it is or making a change.
Do we have any sense of why they came forward with this legislation then? I mean, does anybody know any background as to what prompted this?
I have no understanding of why they've done this, but I can tell you what happened with our 306 rules years ago. There was a period of time when the 306 rules went beyond the 10-year limit. I was on JELCAR at the time. And there was about a month or two, where we had no administrative rules for the minimum standards for public school approval, none. And we then reinstated the previous rules. So we have a lot of areas where there's conflict in rules. For example, if you're looking at the owner's project manager, which we have a bill on right now, and the limit where they have to have a owner's project manager is when you get over a grant that's over $1.25 million. If you look in rules, it's different. And it's because we have modified the statutes since the rules were written. There's basically nothing in the rules regarding the fourth year of mathematics, which is embedded in another course as approved by the local school board. The department at that time saw that what was in statute sufficed for the rules, so they never wrote any rules on it. So there's a lot to this. It's a real complex issue. I think what we ought to do is be looking at this right here and getting the exact relationship between this, what's proposed here, and what we have on board in the rules right now and in statute. And we'll look at it again on Tuesday. But if this is really paralleling what we already have in place, I, for one, do not want to get into business where we're putting everything that's in rules into statute. It's going to be a mess. And I think that we got to be very careful. We don't get down so micromanage to the point where it just gets discombobulated. Representative McGuire.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So Section 3 is my favorite part of this bill. And the reason is when you look at, for example, the SAU chapter in the RSAs, it has an extremely clear list of the duties of a superintendent, right? Mm-hmm. Superintendents hire people and do negotiations with unions and deal with transportation and special ed and so on. There's a big list, all right? But if you go looking through the RSAs for a list of what do school boards do, there is no such list as far as I could tell. It's scattered around. School boards will make a policy for records retention, and somewhere else school boards will do this and that. This is a more comprehensive list that if you want to know what a school board does, here it is, right? And so I think it's valuable in that sense, and the rules have to have a basis, right? And so having this explicitly in the RSAs, this is what school boards do, and if you want to change what school boards do, this is the place to change it, right? And so I think it's valuable.
So Gen 4, in looking at this section 3, and underneath at Romans 6, going down through it, can you do a side-by-side and try to find out for every policy that's stated here, some reference on the other side to either a statute or a rule that's in place?
Right.
Could we have it by Tuesday next week? No, excuse me, this is not an early bill. This is not an early bill. So we got some time to play with on this. Pardon me?
If she can do it by Tuesday.
It'd be nice if you could do it by Tuesday.
So,
Representative Bricky.
So it is, the rule is 303.01.
I have a copy of it right here.
Substantive duty of the school board.
Yeah, but I also like to reference statute too.
So they're already in rules, all of them.
Well, I know that the rule has to reference a statute. That's what the way pursuant to 541A, that it has to be pursuant to some particular statutory language. I'd like to just get a little bit more information on seeing it is Dan McGuire's favorite part of the bill. And so let's make sure we're covering our bases here a little bit and tackle it. Representative Burton.
I just point out that 6I, prohibition of unlawful discrimination on the basis of sex, race, age, and so forth, was made illegal in House Bill 2, because that's the DEI language that was eliminated in House Bill 2. It's illegal in the state right now to do that.
Which one are you, where are you?
Page 3, item 6.
I would like to see what it says in our rules and our statute on that. I think we ought to be very careful here before we start jumping off the cliff. Representative Ames.
Yeah, I just wanted to agree with your request for that additional material, that background that we would then act off of.
Off that material.
And, the concern about the statutes versus policies, I agree with your point. I mean, the statutes are the foundation, and we have rules because expertise resides in the administrative agency, and they're able to take it a step further as long as it's totally consistent with the statutory law. And we've got JCAR, what's it called, JCAR? JCAR. To police that, to make sure that the rulemaking isn't going off on its own. Yeah, so it all makes sense to me, and starting off and seeing if maybe there is some need for something on this issue being retained and kept in some status, maybe interim study or some status other than the ITL that we've been talking about for the rest of the statute. It's something worth doing. Let's get a little more information. So that makes sense to me.
Further discussion, Representative Damon.
Thank you. In the vein of getting more information, I think it might be helpful when we further discuss this if Liz Brown from the department was here, since she's like the guru of the statutes and the law.
Well, I think what we ought to do is rely upon our own researcher to get this out of the statutes and the rules. I went over and talked with Liz Brown last week for 2 hours straight, and she was trying to still understand some things. She's not necessarily, she's a lawyer, but I don't know if she's familiar with all these rules which go from A to Z here. And that's, I think we ought to be using our people here first. I know that Liz is really underwater with a lot of litigation going on over there right now. This one right here is not an emergency. It's not a rush. We have through May 7th to deal with this bill. We can get the research done here, look at that, and I'd like to get the research as quickly as possible so that we can be looking at this and maybe narrow this thing down if we want to pursue a certain section of it. But there are other sections of this thing right now which I don't know if we want to retain. I don't know. Representative Pellos.
Yes, I'd just like to say that for this section that we're talking about with the rules and the
policy
statutes, that if we could also get somebody to explain to us specifically who is responsible for what, because I'm thinking, but I'm not going to say for sure this is how it goes, is that the departments have rulemaking authority over certain parts of the statutes, and that if the rules are not consistent with the statute, because the statute has been changed, then it's probably the responsibility of the, in this case, it would be the state board for getting the rules amended, because the rules follow the statute, not the other way around. He says yes.
Dr. Green?
Yeah, so this would be a case of precedence. Statute always takes precedence. So if the legislature were to pass a bill and it became the law, even if it contradicted something that was in rules, the department would defer to what's in statute, not in rules, in case of any contradiction.
So, well, just my question was to find out who's responsible for getting them back in alignment.
Likely that would be me and my staff within the public school office. So we would work to amend any rules that might be in conflict with new statute, and we would bring that to the state board for a proposal.
Representative Spilsbury?
Thank you. I don't know if this would be fruitful or not, but I recall Senator Sullivan saying this was a merger of 3 different bills, and I haven't investigated, but it would be good to know what were the 3 underlying bills and look at the Senate legislative history on each of them, see how they originated and whether they were changed, what their rationale was.
Yeah, agreed. I think that's where we got to go. So is there any more discussion of that? We will do. Any further discussion on 580? Good. We're done that work session. We got to be careful on these rules, and that, we write broad statutory language. We should not get down into the nitty gritty of running a school. I think we got to be very, very careful. Somebody needs to, that's right. And that's what you got a local school board elected to do.
There you go.
Y'all, and not the rape job too. We just got elected to the school board.
And Ray's told me he's going to change the whole world.
Oh boy.
What?
He can do it.
Try 189.
Okay, the next one we got here. What are we on? 491? Yeah. Okay, 491.
This is education freedom accounts to the CTE.
Oh, jeez. Yeah.
I was looking at school board, 189, RFA 189:1, okay? Where are you at?
Back to that too.
Oh, okay.
Well, that's what's being changed by the bill.
Correct, yeah. Oh, it's not easy to read because the photocopy cut off the end. Right. You know, all these photocopies lately, the ends got cut off. Yeah.
Awesome.
We haven't trouble with the picture very difficult.
491, right?
Yeah.
Okay, and we're 491. This bill is put forward by Senator Waters and Senator Lang and others, dealing with the students who utilize education freedom accounts to pay for certain career and technical education funding. But it has other components too. 491. The first two sections there dealing with career technical education, and the second part dealing with tuition and transportation associated with CTE. The issues that are being brought up here by Senator Waters here are issues which have been discussed by the CTE folks for years. We have support, financial support, going to the CTE program from a separate account than adequacy. It's the tuition and transportation amounts to $9 million each year of the biennium. And from that $9 million, we subtract out first the transportation costs. And the transportation costs are usually somewhere around $700,000. They've been $680,000 and $700,000, and it's based upon reimbursing school districts for the transportation from the sending district to the receiving district at 25 cents per mile per pupil. 10 cents, 25 cents for the person driving their own vehicle. It's approved by the local board. 10 cents, that's right. And then also of the remaining money, that's after you subtract out that transportation dollar, then you have your tuition dollars, which the local sending district has to pay the receiving center. And it's based upon per pupil cost in most of these CTE centers, and it's based upon anywhere from 20% to 40% of the per pupil average cost at that receiving center or district. Some are charging 20%, some are 30%, some are 35%, some are 40%. And there's also a 3% beyond which they are required to pay for capital improvement fund at the CTE center. That's a 3% of the average per pupil cost. You have some centers like down in Dover where they charge for a student to attend from a sending school to a receiving school varying amounts depending upon the course or program they're in. If they're in a course that's less cost, it's usually about 20%. If you're in a course that's more cost, it's going to be up to 30%, 35%, 40%, depending upon the type of equipment and the cost of running that program. Most of the school CTE centers have just one cost, and they've identified as 20, 30, 40, 35, whatever percent of the average per pupil cost. When that's all taken into account and the districts are paid based upon what's left out after the transportation money's been taken out of that $9 billion. Going back a few years when I talked to Steve Rothenberg over at Concord Center, CTE Center, they were being reimbursed 58% at what was due them. Otherwise, it was prorated based upon the total amount of money, the $9 million, was not enough to pay for it. In order to pay for what was necessary at that time, it would be another $6 million on top of the 9. Pardon me? Yeah.
This past year?
This past year, I don't know exactly what it's this past year, but it'd be more. Now, it's an issue that it comes back to when we asked the Commissioner of Education to up the ante from $9 million this last year, because FY26 has $9 million in it this year. Can't increase it because of our maintenance of effort. Every time we increase the cost, we are governed by that cost in future bienniums. We can't go back. But that's not necessarily the case, because we've had the $9 million cost for the last 8 years. Prior to that, it was $7 million down that level. So it has been changed. So what we have is we have a real problem with not having enough money for the CTE tuition transportation. And what they're trying to do is have the commissioner over DOE break this into several accounts, one for tuition, one for transportation, and funding it's appropriate. We did modify the transportation reimbursement formula 2 years ago, where it's not paid based upon the per pupil cost per mile. It would be based upon the type of vehicle, the number of miles traveled, and the number of trips traveled per day. And I don't know if they've got that together yet or not. I don't know if Jeff Beard has that together yet or not. But that is to go in effect, I believe, by this coming July. So we have some issues there. So I agree with Senator Waters on Route 1 and 2. We need to break this down so we can better budget and predict what our tuition and transportation are and fund it in our state budget. And so the finance people know exactly what we need, rather than staying at this single maintenance of effort of $9 million a year. That's 1 and 2. Representative Bricky, you're on the council. You may have something more recent than what I have.
Well, I was just going to say that this past year, my school district got, we budget for 75%.
Yep.
And we received, I think it was 42%. And so we got a second bill from our district, from our CTE center for $240,000. That was something that we hadn't budgeted for.
Yeah, it's a 25-75 split.
Right. It's not, we're not different than anybody else. My guess is every school district got a separate bill from their CTE center, because that $9 million is not enough money.
Yeah.
We really need to figure out a way to fix that. You're right.
And the Carl Perkins money is based upon what we appropriate here.
Yes.
If we go less, Carl Perkins will do the same thing.
Right.
So I think paragraphs 1 and 2 are needed. Now, the third part is the EFA program. And that requires some discussion on our part. Where's the money coming from? I'm not opposed to it. I'm all for it. Believe me, I'm a choice guy. I believe that opportunity ought to be available to every child, especially when it comes to trades. But there are wait lists to think about. Yeah, Representative Bricky.
I know that there, and because of the funding the way that it is, I know of one school district that sends to the Concord CRTC. They cut their students, they're sending students from 70 to 35 this year because they just couldn't afford it. So, and I testified last week about choice. I'm not opposed to choice. I just think that this, I don't know that we can afford this.
Representative Damon?
So the language in lines, 16 to 18 doesn't have a cost attached to it. I mean, ultimately there would be a cost. I'm not disagreeing with that. But the way this is written, this is just information being made available to EFA students about career and technical availability. Doesn't say anything about who pays or who pays what. The other bill that has the cosmetology program in it has a CTE and EFA cost in it. So just to be clear, I think I have that right.
Wrong bill, sorry.
It's all good.
This bill does provide, says information.
Right,
Yeah,
but not a cost.
I have that question there written down in it too.
Well, Senator Sullivan did clarify that the Senate had amended the bill to remove any money from it.
Senator Sullivan or Senator Waters?
Excuse me, Senator Waters. My mind's going back to our last discussion. Thank you. I have two sort of off the substance observations about the bill. I don't know whether this is found in other statutes or not. It's the first time I've seen it, and it seems unconventional and a bit weird. In lines 3 to 4, the rulemaking paragraph starts with the phrase, "in consultation with House and Senate committees responsible for education policy and financial matters." I've never seen that kind of a consultation proviso in any rulemaking grant. And furthermore, I think it sort of usurps the jail car purpose. So I don't think that belongs in the bill.
Yeah, I like that too.
Agree with you.
Second observation, this is very incidental, but I can't let it escape us. In the second page of the fiscal note, if you want an illustration of how bizarre our SWEP law is, the third and the fourth bullets indicate that there's a different impact to the state fiscally, depending on whether the student is coming from a community whose SWEP is greater than their adequacy claim. So in the third bullet, it's indicating that there's a net cost to the state. And in the fourth bullet, the reciprocal case, there's not, but maybe a cost to the district. I just, completely off the point, but that illustrates how bizarre our SWEP law is.
Yes.
Can I go back to what you were talking about, the in consultation with the House? I missed part of this, the introduction on this. I apologize because I was over at introducing another bill with the Senate. But I made a note here, and I don't know if it pertains to this. It says the State Board of Education has rulemaking authority. The Department of Education does not have rulemaking authority. And this line 4 specifically crosses out the state board and brings in the department. So is that why this was brought in and worded this way? Because the department hasn't been given rulemaking authority, so therefore they have to do this in consultation with us? Is that maybe the reason for that verbiage?
Nate, you have a second? I heard from that the money is appropriated for $9 million, but then the department, when they are setting up the funding formula, can break it into two components that are separately object code here, object code here.
I missed the beginning.
Yeah.
Well, I think I can address what you're asking, Representative Colcom. No, the prefatory language doesn't help that paragraph one way or the other. Second, Senator Waters did make clear that he was trying to shift the current responsibility from the state board to the department. And third, I don't know whether we want to do that or not, but if you wanted to do it, that's what this paragraph in fact does. So this creates the rulemaking authority.
I obviously came in and made that statement, but I had drilled that in, so.
Representative McGuire.
So what I remember from the public hearing was the state DOE objected to that because they in general do not write rules. The State Board of Education writes rules, right? And that's their big thing that they do is write rules. And so it was kind of like the DOA complained because this is a can of worms they didn't want to get into, is rule writing. So.
Thank you.
Also true.
Should have gone back and listened to the hearing.
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
So to add to what seems to be a bit of confusion, because I concur with what has been said, but I also noted that Senator Waters, in introducing the bill, indicated that change from the state board to DOE doing these particular rules, that he had discussed that with Drew Klein, who approved of doing that.
That's right.
I would suggest that having inconsistency in whether the agency is responsible for rules or the board is would not proceed very well. So like one little piece goes to DOE and the rest stays with the board. That doesn't seem like a good structure to me.
So,
Representative Phillips?
yeah, I mean, this is definitely a problem here, but the way it usually works is that from my experience, is that the department would develop the rules, and then, as it says here, the state board, they adopt it. So it's kind of like this. The department makes a draft of the rules, and generally the state board would accept those, but they might find, based on testimony they received from the public, they might make some alterations to it.
Why can't the department just develop a formula without having you do rules?
So one of my
Why can't the
thoughts
department-
is maybe the department should look at what the programs that each school has actually cost, using kind of like a cost accounting approach, and go from there.
You can read that sentence, the Department of Education shall develop a formula for determining separately the tuition and transportation costs. Take all the rule stuff out.
Yeah.
And take the beginning part that Representative Spilsbury said out. Take all the rule out.
So it would simply read, Roman numeral 4, the State Department of Education shall develop a formula for determining separately, and the rest of that sentence. So we could get an amendment that removes the phrase that Representative Spilsbury brought up, line 3 in the first part 4.
Why the state board?
Did I just say it wrong?
No, you did not.
You said the State Board of Education. You know, she said state,
I mean to say
the
Department. of
Department of, yes, that's right.
Education. If I did not say that, I
Yeah,
meant to.
I was here.
I was pretending to say Department.
Well, whatever was said, I think we understand.
Yeah.
So I think if the department is going to make a formula, some kind of formula for determining the cost, I think that it needs to be in rules. Because otherwise people will say, well, where'd you get those numbers from? You know, and could they use one formula one year and a different formula the next? I think it needs to still be in rules. Well, it's not in rules now. The formula's not in rules.
That's what's called for here. So the revised language would take out the in consultation clause and then say the department shall, in rules adopted pursuant to RSA 541A, and that process, I assume, involves the board. The board adopts the rules. And so the department's developing
That's good.
the formula.
That's
Yeah.
good, Dick. So if we change that with an amendment, the way Representative Ames just mentioned, and is there any problem with lines 16, 17, and 18?
Chair, excuse me.
Yeah.
I think that the information should be available.
Pardon me?
Pardon me? I think that the information should be available.
Yeah, well,
And the man from the scholarship fund, from the Children's Scholarship Fund, said that he would be more than willing to get that information out to the EFA students.
Yeah.
yeah, I think that, it must have been Matt Southerton, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah, you know, I think if we make the change up there in lines 4 and 5 and then leave the rest of this thing alone,
Yeah.
we'd be okay with the bill.
That sounds good to me. Let's do that.
Do you want me to make the amendment?
You know, how about if Representative Ricky and Representative Peoples, they're both on the advisory council,
You don't need dating.
work together on that, bring that, because we're talking about changing the part up here for the tuition and transportation for CTEs. So basically, they're going to say that the Department of Education shall, in rules adopted pursuant to the develop a formula.
Okay,
Yeah.
sounds good.
Are you two good with that?
Yeah.
Okay, good. So if you can get that done, we could hammer this one out on Tuesday.
Sure.
Okay. Good.
I have a golf bar and so go.
You have a golf lesson?
Yep.
It's not.
I don't want to hear
Myrtle
about your
Beach?
golf lessons, nails, hair.
Okay, do we have anything else today? We have, that's really one. Okay, we had one other bill for, as a work session today. We did 580, right?
Yeah, we're about 513, 531.
513?
513 is not on the docket for today.
Yeah,
Oh, my bad.
only 531's on today.
Okay.
The first part's all about the cosmetology program that they, White Mountain Community College, and the second part here. The only thing that I have a problem with that last part, and I think we need to maybe just ask, there is a fine program going on now at Keene State College dealing with construction, OSHA, safety stuff, which they are working with CTEs and with kids coming in, and that's in a facility on the campus of community college. You know, this may include programs located on community college system, maybe on higher education campuses, on public school higher education campuses, and not necessarily close it down. In the past, when we got involved with a lot of this, the community college has been the driver. But with the 3-year programs now being offered at Plymouth State, and with the community colleges aiming to go in the direction of 3-year programs, and there's an effort going on right now. So I would just, you know, see if it's, you know, work with the community college and work with the higher education and find out if in fact that's happening at Keene. If not, we're good with the community college system, but I don't want to eliminate them if they have a fine program going on. And they certainly need a lot of help down in Keene right now.
They do.
Yeah, they really do. That is the driving force. That's one program that's an exceptional program in Keene right now. And they're breaking Keene up into 3 different college-type programs down there now. And this is one of them, and there's a wait list for kids to get in this construction program down there. And it's really viable. It's one of the best in the country.
You want me to call and check on it and see if that's what's happening? And if high school kids are there, and then we can.
I'll talk to Don, okay? Because I talk to him quite frequently. On the way home, I'll stop at Plymouth and talk with Don Burks. He's now the interim president of Keene.
Yeah.
And so I think he's the one that's going to be able to give us the answer. And working with his provost too, with Nate Bottage.
Are you thinking of just like adding or university system?
Or just higher
Higher
education,
education and
public higher
Oh,
education,
change the whole thing to just higher education?
public higher education.
Public higher.
Yeah.
Yeah, there are two places in the sentence where.
Yeah, that's right. So that can be worked out. We could get that wordsmith by the higher ed people, or even legislative services can help us out. Are there any other areas we want to look at in terms of this one right here? How do you feel about the cosmetology program up there?
I need a haircut.
Representative Glad?
Are there any costs that, yes, Representative Peoples?
I thought it was interesting that there was no representation from the legislature on this at all.
From the who?
Right. You have the White Mountain College, you got the chancellor, you got school administrative unit, Berlin Regional Technical Center. But nobody, I don't see anybody from the CT advisory panel.
I'm not involved with them anymore, so I can't really tell you. You're on that board. Have you talked about it?
No, this did not come up before us. First we heard of it was this bill.
Right, we can. Sorry, we can certainly, we meet Monday, right?
Yep.
We meet Monday, so we could certainly bring it up and see if there's any appetite for having. But, I mean, there's the two of us and Senator Waters
Right.
on the advisory council. And then the rest are, people from all walks of life. And just sort of like, I don't know that any of us need to be on it, to be perfectly honest with you.
That's a task force. It's not.
Right.
Senator Waters seemed to consider it a win, that it was not a new responsibility.
Exactly.
Right? He made that clear.
Yeah.
And that's what worried me.
I doubt there's any reservations about going ahead with the bill with the change you were talking about. They demonstrated a need in Berlin. They also talked about this in the form of it being a pilot. So I think it's a good idea.
You might want to consider the representative of the community college system to maybe some other language, or
Oh, right, if we change that.
representative of the chancellor of the community college system. Maybe some discussion with White Mountain is there, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So if the White Mountain College, if there's a representative from White Mountain Community College, and then right underneath it, there's another one that's the chancellor of the community college, you need both of those?
Yeah.
Seems inclusive.
Maybe it could just be a representative of. Maybe it could just be a representative of, higher ed, representative from public higher ed.
This one's.
Yeah.
I think if you look at this list, what it's demonstrating is that this is a very local focus,
Yeah,
right? I don't think we need to add to it.
but if we're
you're
gonna
going to
change,
open up to allow that Keen program to get in, which you could, because it's also on the second part. Well, of course, that you're talking about the first part, because the second
Right.
part is different. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's good the way it is.
yeah, you're right, yeah.
Yeah. Good. All righty. Any other discussion on this one? Yeah, we'll just get some feedback from Don Burks.
I assume we should all count on 10 a.m. for next Tuesday, right?
10 a.m., I think so.
And with an objective to exec as many as we can, so we aren't continuously bringing 18 people back.
Yeah, there's going to be, like I said, I am going to probably bring forward a non-germane amendment to get the academic standards incorporated into one of these bills that we're going to try to, if we get rid of one, or add it onto a bill. Because we know that we changed the word curriculum frameworks to academic standards. And that came out of the Legislative Oversight Committee. And we have that which we have to do, and we have also the possibility, if we ever want to change our academic standards. And by the way, I was watching UCLA game the other day, the girls playing, and they're playing against South Carolina, and they talked to Corey Close is her name. She's the coach, and she worked with Woodard, Coach Woodard out at UCLA years ago. And a person from the media asked her, what's one thing that you could do to have kids come to you better educationally prepared? You know what she responded? We need kids that have finance literacy. Now, the personal finance literacy, she said that openly. She said they're coming in and I'm acting like a parent for these kids that are playing ball. They don't know how to handle their dollars. And then you look at the academic standards, and if you looked at them the other day, when we have some that are written in 2001, there are no academic standards of personal finance literacy, and it's one of the 13 academic areas which is subject area for the substantive criteria and adequate education. We need to have staff at the department to help get this stuff done. And Nate does not have the staff there to do that. He's got people all over the place. Mark would be here today, but Mark's busy doing something else. Vacation, yeah, which it's well deserved. It's well deserved.
It is well deserved.
Yeah. I'll take my vacation.
You better.
But at any rate, I think that those two things we need to attach to something here. And I think it's something which would be a bipartisan type effort to support the academic standards. I think that's our primary job of being here in this business. Setting good academic standards.
She will be done by 1:45
Yeah,
on Tuesday.
we should be.
Okay, good.
We should be. Yeah. Yeah. But we'll probably have to meet later on to get some of the amendments I've been just talking about somewhere along the way. So we'll have to leave some bills out. Rep. Spilsbury. Okay, anything else? We are adjourned.